Um, and it says that we are live. All right. Hello, 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 everyone. How's it going out there? Oh, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so I'm a illegitimate scholar, and I do a show on YouTube. I do some live streams, interview podcast about 2 times a month, and then I'm starting to make more standalone videos. Usually they're on cultural anthropology, which is the cultural side of anthropology, but I do some archaeology as well, as in archaeology content. And I made a few videos where we got connected on Flint Dibble, specifically on maritime archaeology and some of the Ice Age evidence. When he responded, he called me a liar. And so we've been going back and forth for a while. But yeah, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. It's good to have you on. It's yeah, the whole Flint Dibble saga. That's when I first saw you was filling in gaps in the shipwreck stuff that I'd missed or that I had not pointed out.
And that's so funny because I hadn't seen your video. I'd seen others of your video before then. And
Mm-hmm.
then we had very little overlap, but they supplement each other very
Yep.
well,
Yeah,
because we
agreed.
had such little overlap. But it was crazy. And yeah, good job on the taphonomy stuff, man. I had missed some of that, and I had no clue on the seeds. I studied a lot of maritime archaeology, but I never really did any besides the very basics of like archaeobotany stuff. So I didn't even know where to start for that. I
Yeah.
loved it, what you did there.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, it's I love what you did there too. It was nice to have it coming from at least one other source, and that it wasn't just Dan over here making stuff up. And especially when you come in with all this different information, but still coming to the same basic point that this stuff was being misrepresented.
Right, right. And I think the canoe thing, the canoe thing was huge. As in, Flint called this the oldest shipwreck ever, but it's the 7,000 year oldest shipwreck off the coast of Italy. But it's a few dugout canoes found in a lake, and the only engagement I've had from archaeologists on that on Twitter has been with people saying, "Oh, you're splitting hairs. It doesn't matter." But actually, the distinction is huge, and anyone who's seen your taphonomy video knows that, because these canoes in a lake, this is fresh water. They were not a wreck. They would have been stored there. This is pretty standard across human cultures how they stored dugout canoes, which were made across many different continents. They would store them under the ice level in a lake, and they're less likely to over time deteriorate, because regardless of what Flint thinks, yes, things do deteriorate over time. That's obviously
How
not
that
true.
works.
Yeah, it's there's no 30,000-year-old wood. Well, there is, but there's very, very, very little of it, and it's not found on the bottom of the ocean. So yeah, the canoes were huge, and I think the way that people responded to a lot of my information, the way that archaeologists responded, was very emblematic of a lot of their biases, and how it's a ideological fight for them, as everything is to a certain extent.
Yeah, that's definitely one thing that surprised me. And it's got to the point where I'm starting to see kind of a distinction between a lot of these the debunkers and archaeologists and stuff that I didn't really make before. I mean, I've always had a there's always been certain things. It's like, well, this guy, he gets more underhanded, and this guy sticks to the evidence. But a lot of these guys are just it's like they're like the ideological thing is so they're they're like it's almost like dealing with the religious zealot. They will not backpedal one step. They will not shift. They will just forge on ahead. All things be damned.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a level of religious devotion to it. I've identified this before. I once wrote a thread on Twitter about comparing the collapse of a New Guinean cult that was ending the lives of women and girls and boys, actually, in the place that they lived, and the collapse of this. And I compared the level of influence that they had to the Ivy League, as well as colleges in general. But it's at a base level, I think the most simple way to look at it is a matter of incentives, where the incentives of the people who derive their self worth, their income, their status from academia, and they've invested so much time and money into it and much of their lives, they're going to work in conjunction with those institutions, as they're essentially clients in a patronage system of that system.
Yeah, it's that makes a lot of sense actually. There's I was talking to a guy at Randall Carlson's tour takes off here from Spokane, and I met up with that group before they took off here a couple of weeks ago. And I was talking to a guy there who had been studying psychology, and we got to talking because that's what I studied before we both ended up dropping out at some point. He got a lot further than I did. And he said that what ended up getting him to drop out was just this hegemony of ideas that he just felt like there were things that were just like basic psychology things that were being ignored for political reasons and stuff like that. And it's like at the end of the day, it's irritating, but you can very much see that stuff seeping into all corners of this discourse in general. And academia, it's isolated. It's a little bit insular, so it can get away with that echo chamber thing we all hear about in the last 10 years. It's been the big buzzword. That's been a thing that they've dealt with for fucking 100 years. So
Right.
not surprising that we're seeing it really pronounced from that camp. I thank you, Rue. I much appreciate it, my friend.
Yeah, it has been going on for a long time, and there's like I think I also see this idea that and I was talking to Jimmy Corsetti about this the other day, that there is in academia, there's a belief that like they have the monopoly, especially in archaeology, they have the monopoly over understanding these things. And sometimes it goes to the level of them accusing people who just want to put forth an alternative idea on specific things, maybe even just to ask. And even that is seen as a threat to their power. It feels to me, and this is my perception, that there's a understanding of them having a complete monopoly over it, and anything that contradicts that complete monopoly over how the past is interpreted is an attack on their field itself. And that seems like when you're starting from that playing field where you're not willing to give any ground to another side that has different opinions and is actually quite numerous, shown by the popularity of Graham Hancock's productions and of Billy Carson and Jimmy Corsetti, and then smaller creators like you, and even tinier like me.
Yeah, it's well, there's so many different tendrils of the alternate history stuff at this point too. I mean, some of the things to me are far more outlandish than others, but
Right.
to me, at the end of the day, as long as the people that are like looking into that, as long as there's some guys like that are trying, that are actually giving honest effort to investigate this stuff, even if they're, I think that they're wrong as fuck. If they're passionate about it, let them run, because they're certain. If they're looking at things differently than I am, and they're just diving deep into that rabbit hole, they're certain to come up with something different than I would. So what's wrong with that? Well, I'm not an archaeologist though, so it's not stepping in my wheelhouse and stepping on my toes and telling me my letters are no good, right?
Right. And it's one key thing you said there as well. You said something good. Someone's digging into something, they're going to find something good. And I think that with the arguments I've seen from archaeologists, PhD level archaeologists, the mainstream, it's very much, they are thinking about this from the big picture of Graham Hancock's ideas. A lot of their arguments, and I think I'm representing them fairly, are about the effects of his arguments as a whole. They're about like this is harmful to indigenous people. You're bringing up this thing that that some white supremacists talked about 150 years ago. Its association with those ideas. But I've always looked at Graham Hancock and other alternative ways of thinking as like, okay, I don't really care about if his whole entire theory is true or not. I want to view it in an alternative way. And then through this, there's something to learn. It might not be that the theory itself is true, but there's definitely something to learn. And to me, I have that natural curiosity, and I think you do as well. And it saddens me to see that it feels like the mainstream archaeologists don't necessarily have that same curiosity towards specific things. They do great work on their own. I use a lot of it. I cite it in my own videos, and when I talk, I love reading this stuff. I do it almost every day. Which makes this all the more weird, but it's any deviation from complete monopoly is perceived as an attack. So even though it's most of what I do, that 5-10% is enough to discredit me entirely in a sort of academic inquisition.
Yeah, I've seen, I think it was one of Flint's recent videos responding to me. I think it was the one it was where he he was saying that there's lots of good creators out there that are archaeologists and some that aren't archaeologists, but that are like in line with archaeology. And so that they're, you know, they're not off doing their own thing. Well, it's like, well, that's okay. But I mean, no offense, but okay. What's interesting about that? What, I mean, like, the only reason that a guy like Stefan Milo, he's a great example. You know his channel, Stefan
A
Milo?
little bit.
Okay.
Yeah, was that the guy that wears the glasses and talks like, I'm not trying to insult him, but identify him.
No,
Am I
he's
thinking of the wrong guy?
he's a little bit balding. He's got a British accent. He lives up here in the Pacific Northwest. He's archaeology YouTuber, but he's not an archaeologist. He's
right. Yes. I
not
right.
Milo Rossi, but Stefan Milo.
Yeah.
So okay. But anyway.
Yeah. I see him. I
okay.
see who you're talking about. I was wrong before. I was thinking of Mini Minuteman, but yes,
Yeah.
I see who you're talking about. Yeah.
Well, he's a great example of he's not a scientist. You can tell it by the way that he's good at communicating. He's good at talking about these things, but all he does is give their information and repackage it and bring it out to the public, which is fine and good. And that's great, but it's not
what I do.
Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with that. But to say that he has to, the fact that he has to, he gets all the attaboys by Hoops and Dibble and all these other guys. But if he steers outside of if he colors outside of the lines, that's going to vanish real quick. And that's what
happened to you in a lot of ways.
Well, yeah, exactly. And that's just kind of a sad thing. It's like, I mean, yeah, I told, God damn it, now I want to talk about that. Sorry.
It's okay. Up to you, man. It's your live stream.
No, that's true. Oh, hell, what do we got here? What's local enterprise broadcasting? What you got to say, homie? It took architects, engineers, skilled workers, and specialists to build the pyramids. Ironic because these same people are laughed at by mainstream archaeologists regarding construction. Yes, I will not argue with that at all. I get told frequently that I'm in no place to weigh in on any of this stuff by somebody that I know couldn't build a freaking fire pit in their backyard if it was to save their ass. But,
yeah. And that's the thing is with this mainstream archaeology, mainstream academia in general, there's like certain of them, you know, I don't want to, I have plenty of archaeologists that I like. I have them on my channel. Like, I don't want to, because I really I don't want to put off the impression that I hate all of them, but that doesn't mean that I don't feel that the field as a whole and certain individuals are worthy of criticism. And there seems to be a almost contempt, and this is not unique to archaeology, for people that are just craftsmen, you know, like or craftspeople, like, you know, women can do that too, right? It's 2024.
Yep. Yeah.
But they like this real experience of actually doing these things provides you with quite a lot of experience and knowledge and how it is, and it's practical applied knowledge. And that seems to mean nothing to these people if there's a book that you can study it. And archaeologists are better about this than most because they're a field that does more of this hands-on stuff in general. Obviously, there's variation because they do go in the field, but there's still a heavy layer of this. And I remember there was a time where Flint Dibble in that JRE episode, when Graham was asking him, have you ever been to the site? Have you been there? And Flint's like, why does that matter? That doesn't matter. I read about it. And it's like, okay, you need to understand, or you don't need to understand. But in my opinion, my perspective is that these places, these archaeology sites, I understand that they're seen through this lens of academia, this Western created construction that frames the way that you study the past. But that doesn't mean that these are not locations that people lived in, and they were places where humans lived their lives. And I think that just dismissing the idea of even going to one of these locations to not get a feeling of that place is just like, you're not getting the full picture if you're not doing that. Yeah, but I've been ranting too long.
No, you're fine. You're
That's
fine.
That's how I feel. Yeah.
That's why I had you on. Rant away, man. You're fine. Yes, Shermanator, that was about Saksei Huaman. It was one of my favorite moments there is when Flint showed us that he was thinking about the images being falsified, because when Jamie pulls him up and he's like, that's Saksei Huaman right there. And Flint's like, well, I don't know if that image is actually Saksei Huaman. How do I know that's what it is? It's like, well, why would you Why would you think that he was faking the image that's on the screen? That's a weird thing to be suspicious of, unless you were bringing fake images to put on the screen, in which case you might just be suspicious of all of them. But anyway, I digress.
Yeah. Yeah.
One of
And
my favorite
I'll give
moments.
you one example from my and these are in my videos. The link is right down below. Two videos on Graham. There's two videos on Flint so far. And one of them is maritime archaeology. The other one is my response. And one of the first things I bring up in the response is that the first site that he shares it as an Ice Age site, and it just wasn't an Ice Age site. It was the author of the paper didn't claim it was an Ice Age site, and he presented it on the screen in text, where he had time to prepare that it was an Ice Age site, but it was radiocarbon dated. It was this hunting wall, right? And it's a hunting wall underwater. And the identification of it as human in origin comes from the orientation of those stones, which is very funny because it reminds me from later in the episode where Flint completely disregarded the idea that the stones of Bimini Road could be seen to be human without artifacts, as there would be on another road, even though Graham tells him that it's not necessarily a road, that's just the name. But they looked for artifacts across this hunting wall. They identified it as human from its orientation, and I can't argue with their methods at all because I'm not familiar with the science of it. So I take it at face value, but that doesn't mean they didn't search for artifacts there through two places, one a few meters away from the wall and one like 500 to 800 meters, somewhere like that. And they come dated back at 9,800 years before present and 10,600. So the soil they dated was after the Younger Dryas. But the author said it was possible. The only time he mentions the Pleistocene or the Ice Age is in the context of saying Pleistocene or early Holocene. So he never actually claimed it as even a possible Ice Age site. It was a possible Pleistocene or early Holocene. And the argument made for that is just that it's the time between when the ice sheets retreated from this area and when it was submerged again. And the ice sheets retreated before the end of the Younger Dryas, which means that this is a time period in which it was above water and they might have built it then. But that's the only evidence. And the actual dating shows after the Ice Age. But anyway, that's my pitch. More in the videos down below.
Yeah, and make sure and go subscribe to Illegitimate Scholar down there. He's got a Twitter link I put down there below. He's pretty active on X, as they call it nowadays. Whatever the kids call it nowadays, the internets. But yeah, with the Pokemans. But that was actually a really good catch though, because the way that you just he brings it out and just says this is an Ice Age site, and then you have to dig through it and slowly dissect it, and then finally gets to it, and it's like if you don't know what all these different words mean, you're just like Pleistocene, Holocene, I don't know, Miocene, whatever. What are we talking about here? NAGPRA, I don't know. I think that means Ice Age. It requires people to do legwork, and that's something that a lot of his arguments basically seem to hinge on the idea that it's this out of touch idea that the internet seems to just let things go. It's like, oh, cool, that was fun. Now what? No, it's not how this works, buddy. I'm sorry. Nothing gets forgotten anymore. Nothing ever.
Does not forget.
Never. Cart tracks in Austin, Texas. I've never been to Austin, Texas, and looking for cart tracks. I was there for a minute back in the Army days, but have you ever seen any of that stuff, Illegitimate Scholar?
No, I haven't. No. I have not heard anything about that.
Oh, I'll have to look into that. One of these days, I'd like to go down to Texas here in the near future. We'll see. But thank you very much there, Local Enterprise Broadcasting. Mucho gracias. Oh, man. The cart ruts thing is actually funny. The more I hear people talk about it, just seems to kind of pop up all over the place. It just seems more and more of them to places that I'd never heard of like that.
Yeah, I'd have to see more on that. That seems very odd to me. I mean, that would require in Texas. It would, unless they're human drawn, which is strange but not impossible. And there's, that's happened. I mean, even today. I think you can get rickshaws in like Thailand, but usually you find that in conjunction with pack animals, and the megafauna is gone from North America after like 12,000 years. And I still don't have an explanation for that. I used to, of course, coincide the extinction of the megafauna with the introduction of Clovis first Native Americans and them coming in with superior technology, and they wipe out the megafauna. But with humans being on the continent for so much longer, up to 25,000 or more years, I think is currently what it is. It doesn't make any sense, and it requires an explanation. And there are all of these things that either don't have any explanation, or they have what often I see and others see as an explanation that isn't necessarily as solidified as it might appear from a textbook, as it's distilled down to like a textbook. It's not the best argument when you really look at the evidence, and even just questioning those types of things tends to get people in trouble with the mob, and that sucks. I want people to be curious.
Yeah, well,
I just saw a comment. Superior technology compared to what? What I mean by that is that by the time that they reach North America, the technology has progressed quite a bit from like the earliest humans. So when you have humans who started with very, very primitive, very early, like we're talking like not even refined down chert tools, but actually very large tools that haven't been refined over hundreds of thousands of years. The idea was at the time that that as humans had increased their technology over a long period of time, they had been evolving alongside animals. And when the animals evolved separate from that, and then when the Native Americans who came in, they come in with a certain level of technology already. And I'm talking here about like atlatls. I'm not talking about they're coming in with Browning and M240s. Like, that's not what I mean. I mean like an atlatl and some developed, I'm not sure about the specifics, but some more well-developed, more efficient at doing this, then there's not enough time for the animals to survive. But this isn't even a true thing now that we know that humans have been here much longer. But that's what I meant.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, that's I think Mandy's a bit of a troll here. Yeah. Cole's got that nailed. Yeah, it's all right.
Oh, okay.
I get
still
them
a
on
good
occasion. No, you're still absolutely right. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's you're absolutely right. It's you said the magic words high technology. So now we have to talk about aliens. It can't be Clovis points we're discussing. No, sir.
Right.
Nope.
Right.
But no, that the overhunting hypothesis is, I mean, it is a little absurd. There is no question that we would have made an impact on like some megafauna, in particular, like anything that was stuff like that. I forget the name of it, but that giant ass armadillo, that's the kind of thing that we would have fucked up. We're this thing's used to just wandering around and going wherever the fuck it wants to go and just doing whatever the fuck it wants to do. We're just like, no, fuck you. Turn over on your back. You're feeding my family for a month. And so that's the kind of thing I could see us hunting into extinction. But like cave bears and saber-toothed cats, ochre, that's not even close. Birds.
Well, it did happen in Europe, but it was a much longer period of time, and they didn't all go extinct at the same time, and they retreated. It happened in Europe. Like there used to be like, I think there used to be like lions, a certain type of lions. They were more common up north, but a long time ago. But there is archaeological precedent for humans coming in with relatively advanced technology, like the Maoris landing on New Zealand and their effect on the local population, as well as coming with your colonization package, like your goods that they use for colonization. Every culture has these. The Bantu have their farming technology that they use, which allows them to replace a lot of peoples throughout Central and Southern Africa in about the last 1,000 years. The Polynesians, they had, and this varies between them depending on where it is. They had like yams and pigs and chickens, and they also brought rats on. They didn't mean to, but they brought them.
Tubers were a big part of their almost everything that the Polynesians brought with them were either tubers or something that you could put in a pot at sea and it would do all right. It was their entire package, like you say. It was you really see it distinct. I'm working on another video on Easter Island here, and that's one of the things that's always. I love that. I love Easter Island. It's one of the most interesting places. I love seeing it kind of bear out so many of the things that. Do you know who Thor Heyerdahl was?
I do. I actually just found in a bookstore last week a first edition of his book from 1950.
Oh, damn, nice find.
Yeah, I picked that up. Yeah. I think
yeah.
I think it was like 14, 18 bucks.
Oh, hell, I was going to say, did they beat you up on it? It doesn't sound like it. That's not too bad.
No, 18 bucks. Yeah.
That's not too bad at all. But yeah, he's very vindicated here by recent findings, at least on a fundamental level. A lot of you're just absurd for saying this big rock looks like that big rock. I see this meme going around lately where they're making fun of Hancock for pyramids looking the same and comparing it to dolphins and sharks. And it's just like, man, you guys.
I was in the comments of that. And you got to be sensitive because it's a 12-year-old's drawing, but it's in a different context when an adult is then sharing it and supporting it. I should say though. No, go ahead.
Oh, I've been seeing it in other places. I've been seeing it show up kind of doing the little loop on Facebook and stuff. But you should say go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I like the one thing that I would be really proud of the 12-year-old for is the level of understanding and execution of like some good meme graphic design. It was pretty good, and I'm happy that there are kids of that age that are creating rather than just consuming doom scrolling all the time. So I liked it on its face, but it's not a good argument for an adult. It doesn't show understanding of the material, and you wouldn't expect it to at 12 years old. But the adults supporting it are the ones that are being dumb as an argument.
Yeah, that's
in my opinion.
No, I wouldn't argue with that. It's okay. It's fair to say, but like, okay, evolutionary. I forget what the term is. Where they end up synchronizing on things. I forget the damn term, but there's a term for it where things end up looking the same. There's a reason that a porpoise looks like a freaking ichthyosaur, which was like a fish from dinosaur thing, right? And it looks that because that shape
convergent evolution.
Thank you. That's the term. That's these things work. So I get where like they could say, well, it's the same for stacking big rocks, but it's not if it's just merely it is a pyramid. I think that would be a little bit different when you things like the situation with Thor Heyerdahl, for example. He's comparing very specific style of masonry on Easter Island with a very specific style of masonry that he sees in Peru, and says these look identical to me. These look like they were influenced. Oh, that's impossible. These cultures had no contact. You're an idiot. Blah, 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 white supremacy, blah, 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 which he did have some spicy ideas, but it was the goddamn 50s. I mean, it's fucking the day of John Wayne. If spicy ideas were a dime a dozen back then. So culture sucked back then. Don't know what to tell you as far as that went. I'm sorry. I'm sorry that Thor Heyerdahl was a dude back then. But anyway, back to what he was talking about. He was fundamentally right. And we can prove that genetically now on both the human population and on the plant population. So it's just like but you won't see anybody saying that except for in our little corner. The academics will just write a paper. Maybe they'll reference. As mentioned first by Thor Heyerdahl, 1952, and then that's that.
Yeah. And it's, I mean, I'm surprised by that one that people were never like I always looked at that and I was like, yeah, it's possible. Like it's not even that big of a deal considering the how far away the Polynesians we know were able to travel. I mean, to Peru, because they got to Rapa Nui, Easter Island so late, it was like, oh, well, maybe they didn't, but they would have. Like they would have eventually without any outside factors. I know that for sure. Just because the distance to Peru is less than the distance to other islands. There might be something with the currents that makes it more difficult, but there were clearly some of the best mariners in the entire world.
And clearly they got to Rapa Nui. So at that point, it's like that's the hard part. That's the hard part. Hitting the big ass landmass to the east, that's cake. Finding this tiny little dot in the fucking ocean, that's tricky. So it's so weird to me that the way that's a great example of the way that it's just kind of almost dogmatic. It's almost like we're not. There's certain things we just don't entertain. We don't talk about these things. It's like why? But like you were saying earlier, it's a lot of it has to do with like this idea of it must be either right or wrong instead of it just being an idea worth kind of entertaining. I've heard this one a lot about Martin Sweatman's Pillar 43 hypothesis for Göbekli Tepe, the
I'm not familiar.
where it's a like a star chart basically for like kind of like a, it's an archaeostronomy hypothesis that basically says that it's a calendar, right?
Yeah, they
And a
don't
lot
like
of people,
archaeostronomy.
oh no, most of them are not certainly not in the way it gets used there. They like it when it's just like, oh, this is a picture of a star, check that out. Oh, this is their sun god, check that out. They don't like it when
Yeah.
you start talking alignments and shit. I mean, you saw the debate. Flint famously says that the freaking undulating serpent at Chichen Itza is a happy accident, right? It's like, I fucking what?
Yeah. Yeah. I actually had on a archaeologist. He's a PhD student. He's older. He's an older guy, Marine veteran, Cam H. McConnell on Twitter. I've had him on my channel to talk about his theories a few times. And there's, in his opinion, in his interpretation of archaeostronomy, of the connections of not only the alignments of certain material objects, like this thing called the rattlesnake plate, which was found in the Mississippi culture, the alignment of that plate, of certain lines on that plate. It's very in depth. I would recommend you watch the video because he explains it and he's better at it than me. And that's on my channel. It's a connection between the Mayans and the Mississippi culture, a possible connection. But when it's built between multiple pieces of evidence, it's extremely convincing because it's the evidence of the introduction of corn as agriculture, the introduction of this specific piece of material culture that has iconography on it, these symbols on it, of the serpents with the rattlesnake tail, and where certain things point, as in an interpretation of it as a map is, or as a star map, that type of thing is, it's very solid. But when your field doesn't necessarily view that type of evidence as canon, we'll say, as canon to what is true, then it's not true in the eyes of the field, and you can just simply dismiss it, even though the statistical likelihood that this would happen without the connection of all these different things that match up just would seem so extraordinarily low to me. You would have to argue that two different cultures across this is across the Gulf of Mexico, discovered independently the cultivation of corn, as well as the way to, as well as form religions around it that had similar places to look at through the, you know what I'm saying?
No, you're fine. You're
Good,
fine. Go
yeah.
ahead.
Okay, yeah.
You're fine. Carry on, man. You go.
All right. The system of on this rattlesnake disc, it's the same iconography, it's the same cultivation. There is archaeological evidence of human sacrifices, which the Mayans would have done as well in conjunction with this. There's the connection of the rattlesnake, and this gets into general experience because the rattlesnake, and this is what I've been told, is Cam is from, I think, Iowa. He's from a place where they farm corn, and he knows that the rattlesnake in a cornfield keeps away the pests. And so there's a practical element to having reverence for the rattlesnake and why it would enter in to the it would enter into the rituals associated with it. So there's all these things that match up in a very real way. And some of the other older connections, they're maybe a little bit less convincing, I would say, but they're still pretty convincing without talking specifics. But this one is very, very convincing. But the fact that this evidence is not entered into the archaeological record, into the archaeological mainstream conglomerate of ideas, is evidence to me of, like any other social institution that comes out of a culture and comes out of specific people that are selected for certain traits, it shows how biased they are and how there's certain evidence they're not going to look at. And that's just normal. Like, I don't think anyone should argue, especially in anthropology, that they're unbiased. Anthropologists are the first people that should understand that everybody is biased in what they do, and all socially constructed institutions have their own. And to me, they don't seem to recognize those to the level that they should.
That's a pretty I'd say that's a pretty profound statement. I mean, I don't work in the field obviously, but from outside it definitely seems that way. That it seems like things that challenge that come in and potentially challenge anything to their position, and not necessarily of authority, even just like a guy's got a pet hypothesis, right? Like if you take the infamous Clovis first example, if a guy's wrote 50 papers on this shit, and it's like he's got his life's work wrapped up to it, and the 3 times he's gotten real big accolades, it's all come from Clovis first papers. Fuck you, and you're overturning that shit, man. You're not
Mm-hmm.
poking him in the evidence, you're poking him in the heart. So
Right.
it makes sense that these things are going to come up frequently, but you would expect you would think that anthropologists would be equipped to handle it. But as I've told many archaeologists and anthropologists on Twitter, y'all ain't psychiatrists, y'all ain't psychologists. You're not diagnostic people. You're just like you look at it, you're like, well, this is this phenomena that's happening. But it's the Freuds of the world that look at it and go, why the fuck is that happening? And that's not really something that the field deals in. So it's not
Right.
surprising that they're lacking in self-awareness there.
Well, they're very used to being in a hierarchical system, a very rigid hierarchical system. You were in the military, I was in the military. I think there's some parallels there. Not in the levels of masculinity. It and with like the violence and everything, but in its own way, it does have that strict hierarchy. In its own, based on the traits that they have. And these are people that even at the lowest level, professors, they're used to giving like almost a Confucian level of reverence towards the people above them, but they're also used to standing and speaking as a authority at the front of a classroom towards a bunch of teenagers and people under the age of 22 years old in most cases. And so this is their level of interaction with people. They're used to educating people. You hear this word sometimes, you read it from some of these archaeologists. They're like, I'm here to educate you. And that is always a red flag to me. And that comes from my own understanding of the world. But at least I understand that, right? I understand that this is my bias that I have.
Yeah.
But it's not, it's a, if that's what you're used to, if you're in a field that is, by some estimates, over 90% towards one side of the political spectrum, it's not, it could be the other side as well. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter what side it is. It's just, it's the environment that they're in, and that is anyone is in, it feeds into how they view the world and what they experience. That's why different experiences, even though humans have been anatomically modern for 300,000 years, that the vastly different human experiences that we've had have created vastly different cultures. And that's why I study cultural anthropology, because I'm so interested in that, how people can be so different over different times based on their culture and their individual interaction with the world. And that's where you get things like the Inuit, who are eating like a keto diet because they're eating, but they find ways to create a diet over time that gives them the nutritional needs that they have through eating like fish eyes to get vitamins and things like that. And yeah, that's how I feel about it.
No. No, yeah,
Yeah.
don't feel like you got to curtail yourself. This isn't a video like this.
I get
like,
it. Yeah.
Yeah, this this is a live concert. This isn't a recorded album, so they expect us to drop the guitar every now and again. It's okay.
Sometimes I just like talk myself into a circle and I'm just like,
it's all right.
but
It's
I
all
think
right.
that stuff is pretty good. Another thing is I looked up these statistics that I'd like to talk about. In 2015, Americans' confidence this is from Gallup. Gallup does it every year. I think they're a great institution. I love their stats. They seem to do a very good job of getting how people really feel. They do this every year. They do a trust in institutions. And from 2015 to 2024, it went from 57% of people in the United States having a great deal or some trust in higher academia. And now in 2024, we are at 36%. And look, like, I didn't create that. You didn't create that. Graham Hancock did not create that. Jimmy Corsetti did not create that. Billy Carson did not create that. This didn't come from us. This is a pre-existing thing from other factors, and certain people are capitalizing and on that lack of trust in these institutions. And that's going to naturally happen. The way that people judge information is always going to change over time. The way people judge information is culture. One of the main features of culture in archaeology, and anthropology, which includes archaeology, at least in North America, is that it is dynamic, which means it is ever changing. And you don't really get modern peer review until the 1950s. The field is not as long standing in its current form as far as people think it is. So it's going to continue to change. It's not always going to be the universities that used to just be these missionary schools, essentially. Not missionary, but theological schools founded in Harvard in 1636, I think, in the Massachusetts Bay Colony. It wasn't anything. My alma mater, UConn, was an agricultural school in 1881 when it was founded. In their current form, this is a relatively recent thing within a few generations, within some people's lifetimes. And it's going to change again.
No, I completely agree with you there. It's pretty crazy how it's gotten to this point where they try to blame the lack of faith in academia on guys like us, and it's like, to me there's really two big smoking guns that are responsible. One of them would probably have to do with the big fat medical debate that we had for a few years there, that was a political football. And I don't really care what side of that debate you fall on. There is no question that both sides had grifters with letters next to their name. They were both sides. Right. You could watch a TikTok and see a professional, and from the very beginning of it, as soon as they opened their mouth, you could tell if they were going to tell you the beds were full or the beds were empty. You could tell right away which one you were going to get. It was a political football. So that cost a lot of people's faith in that system. And then when it's things like this become a high profile deal, like the whole archaeology mess, because Graham Hancock does Ancient Apocalypse and it just explodes. This is a chance for them to look honest. Archaeology has a chance to debunk Hancock's claim in a very real way by addressing things they do and don't know and being legitimate about it. But instead we get this dishonest kind of, well, it's believing in Atlantis is the same as believing in a flat earth. You guys are all a bunch of you guys tacitly endorse white supremacy. I'm not saying any of you are white supremacists, but all of you guys say things that white supremacists would love. It's fucking weasel word bullshit.
Yeah. Especially when Jimmy Corsetti is saying that Atlantis is in Africa.
Yeah. So yes. Exactly. Graham's like, well, it's either Africa or South America, or maybe under one of the continental shelves. But what do we got here? Mutually assured destruction. Many of Hancock's critics are self-styled political activists first and academics second. Dibble knows exactly what he meant about Hancock and racism. Yes, and yes, some more. That is exactly right. A lot of these guys are in there to just score political points. It's one of the things I said a while back that pissed off a few of the archaeologists. But imagine how self-centered you would have to be to think like, man, I really hate racism. I'm going to do some combating it. I wonder look, the field that I work in just happens to be perfectly situated to combat racism in the real world. And you dig up old bones. How the fuck does your brain connect all that together and be like, I'm going to really fix racism by going on the internet and talking about old bones and how I'm right. What in the whoo-hoo? It's like, dude, I don't even understand how that comes out of somebody's brain, but we get a lot of it.
And to me, it's almost like, it's like using an accusation of something like racism for your own ideological and, academic argument is, to me, pretty disrespectful as well. And that argument only works if you believe that they are not sincere, which I do believe. But the problem is the people on the other side believe that they're sincere in what they're doing, and that others are doing. They believe that it's sincere, and I'll consider that at least as an argument that's being made. But personally, I do find it disrespectful. But they're not going to care when I say that it's disrespectful. I don't even bother usually. Yeah. But there's a lot of things that they do that I find disrespectful. But I feel like I'm more willing than a lot of the archaeologists I interact with. Some of them are fine, but a lot of them that I interact with to understand that other people don't think the same way that I do, and I'm willing to give them that grace. And I don't feel that that's given in return, and that creates some animosity.
Well, absolutely. That's it's one of the things that you see it with the as a matter of fact, watching your conversation with the Ojibwe, is that how it's pronounced? I want to make sure I say that right.
I think so. Yeah, I think it's
Okay,
pronounced a few different ways.
all
They're all
right,
anglicizations anyway.
of course. But watching him talk about it, that was kind of interesting because I see this a lot in my research when archaeologists and the tribes up here in the Pacific Northwest would butt heads. Uh, there's like that when he was talking about, well, we didn't come over from some land bridge, we were always been here. I read, there was a paper, a newspaper article from the 1990, and the guy, a tribal spokesman, is saying basically just that. He flat out says, they tell us we came across from a land bridge, we grew from the caves in the ground, we've always been here. And that's okay. For somebody, if you're thinking about things purely from a scientific perspective, that might make you bristle with, oh my God, I can't believe somebody would even think that. But if you're thinking about it from an anthropological perspective or a psychological perspective, even, it's like, well, this is where fuckers are coming from, man. So if you're going to like deal with these people in your life, this is where they're coming from. So you either respect that that's where they're coming from, or you treat them like shit inherently. And I would dare say that I'm not saying that the Atlantis bro is, I'm not saying the Atlantis bro and the indigenous Americans have any parallel to freaking persecution. So none of you nut jobs run off with it that way. What I'm saying is that the same thing happens here, where it's like, you can't say, I think of you guys like somebody who's a flat earther, and then say I have respect for you. Those two fucking things are mutually exclusive. So you're gonna have to find. So anyway, I think you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, I fully agree. And just for the context for people who haven't seen that conversation, he's telling me this, and I'm only, all I'm doing is actively listening. I'm not going to challenge this type of belief. It's I understand it for what it is, and I'm not going to argue on it from an anthropological perspective. That would be silly. It wouldn't make any sense to argue against him on that. And these types of beliefs are very common from across all of the continents that people live on. It's not just a Native American belief. So it makes sense that they would have it. And but for the other side of that is that I don't feel that other beliefs that are also closely held by other people are respected in the same way that is people like us. And that sucks to be treated like that. And I want to treat people with the respect of their beliefs that are held in this way, attached to their identity, that are not harmful to others, because I believe that's what that is. And I just wish people would do the same for me. And I'm fully willing to do that in any case. And I don't have any qualms about it. It doesn't bother me. And you'd think if they were being consistent that anthropologists would argue against a claim like that, but they don't, and they shouldn't, but they don't. But they do when it's convenient ideologically in certain cases.
Exactly, ideologically, and there's where it is. There's certain times that it's okay to go ahead and criticize the beliefs of someone, but I would agree that indigenous Americans got done pretty raw, and they should probably, like, when it comes to situations like that, I can understand where there's this very strong sentiment of not stepping on their toes too hard, because it's this is after all their land, right? So I can see this kind of attitude coming from academia that way, far more towards them than other groups. But it's a fundamental thing. Like if you take a used car salesman to take it to the slide all the way down the hill, a used car salesman walks up to the little old lady who's buying a car, different than the mom who's got 2 kids with her buying a car, different than the 19-year-old boy who's driving a car. He comes at them from a different approach because he knows they're different people. And if he comes at them all from the same spot, he doesn't sell any fucking cars. So this is why they, to go back to like why I said like Stefan Milo and stuff, they absolutely have to have these people, because the vast majority of them are, well, they're of the opinion that you can just take a guy like Keanu Reeves and say, hey, man, I think I just need to spend a couple hours with you and I can cure you of your wrong think, buddy, even though he doesn't want anybody to contact him. It's like just this woohoo. They're socially out there. So, yeah, they're not going to do so well on YouTube because I think that they're just it's boring. Like my favorite archaeology channels are boring as fuck.
Yeah, seriously. And it's like, I don't know how many subscribers he who must not be named has.
Call him whatever you want. I don't care.
I'm just kidding. Yeah. But I think it's like you went on a show that 20 million people watch and you seem to gain a few thousand subscribers. I think it might have been a little bit over 10. Yeah. It's not a good conversion rate, man. Like, you're not putting out a good product. But that makes sense, right? Like, he is an academic. He's been trained in in this socially constructed institution of academia. And what the incentives in place for him to work on is not the same incentives of somebody creating a YouTube channel. And, you know, one of the other things that really frustrates me is, especially based on that, is that they don't seem to understand that YouTubers like you and I have a different incentive structure than they do. We are working towards a different end. And just like we have pros and cons, and we have positives and negatives, and there are other things that can supplement that, and that can complement our flaws and be helped by our positives. Just like we have those, they have those as well. They have soft spots. We both have positives and negatives, and it's not an absolute thing in either case. And it's unfortunate that it's viewed that way, because something I've said a lot is that I think that together, mainstream academia in history and in anthropology and archaeology, they and us YouTubers, amateurs like us, that are making YouTube videos of various different things, we would both benefit from cooperating with the other one. And I'm still willing to do that. I already do that with certain individuals, but I wish that there wasn't this group animosity. And I've always said the second Flint and other people, they want to stop what they're doing, they want to stop the accusations, clean slate. We're good. It's fine. No need for apologies. It's fine. Clean slate, move on, work together. Let's figure it out and not be offended by what the other ends up believing.
Yeah, and, I can go
wishful thinking, but
I can agree with that 100%. I mean, if you may have heard me say it before, like, I got along a lot better with these guys until I called out the whole white supremacy origins of Atlantis hunting thing. And then when the response to that was effectively, it doesn't matter because it still has roots in white supremacy, despite the fact that you just proved that all the legs to this table are bullshit. That was back in January this year. And that was when it became like, well, you know, I asked you guys questions. I over and over and over again, I ask you guys questions. I bring things to you. I discuss things with you, and this, like, you won't drop, just despite the evidence, you won't drop it. It's like, there's a certain point where, okay, Flint cries about the reactions of my subscribers to my videos on him. It's like, dude, your words get me called racist every single fucking day. Every single day, somebody comes and tells me I'm a racist, and that shit's coming from you, not you, but Flint, Hoops, and a fucking couple of other people that spread that stuff as ground zero for it. And so it makes it where it's like, it's really difficult to have a conversation with you guys and be not like just fucking pissed, because you're like, man, I like you guys a lot, but then these guys, they hang out with racists. Well, I said, hey, you're all right, buddy. It's like, God damn, dude.
John Hoops, actually, I barely knew who the guy was. He had he preemptively, as far as I know, I never interacted with him on Twitter. He preemptively blocked me, and then he was commenting on my post, which I didn't even know you could do. So I wasn't getting notifications for them. And eventually you can see the post if they comment it. And I was like, what's
Hmm.
going on here? Like down below where it says like, you're not allowed to see these. They're
Yeah.
like being hidden for some reason. Usually it's just somebody being racist, but it was John
Yeah.
Hoops down there accusing me of racism, or accusing me
Hmm.
of doing a racism, I guess, because I put up a chart of teacher IQs. And I was talking about SAT scores and IQs, and I was like, yeah, teachers are some of the lowest scoring on these things. And he was like, oh, you're, and I'm paraphrasing, but he's like, oh, you're being racist. IQ score stuff is like attached to racism, but it was completely in the context of
Holy
teachers.
shit.
Right, right. It was completely in the context of teachers, which I then did a little bit of research and discovered are one of the top disproportionately white fields.
Mm.
And this was based on degrees obtained, and they're like 80% white.
Yeah.
And then all I'm thinking is like, you can't think about IQs without thinking about how non-white people are dumb. Is that what you're implying? Like, is that how that exists in your mind? That's more racist to me than anything. Because when I posted this thing, I wasn't thinking about race at all. It
Oh,
wasn't part of it. I was thinking
yeah.
about teachers and the IQs or SAT scores of different degrees. Like
That's
I don't. Where does that come from?
yeah. And that whole idea too, that whole 10 degrees of separation and it's still racist. I mean, this is, you basically seed everything that a racist wants to touch. If that's how you want to handle it, it's like, okay, now I guess all the racists went and fucking started watching Star Wars, so now you can't watch Star Wars. And all the race, I mean, is that how this works? I mean, come on, you're just going to
Yeah,
cough it up every time. I mean, you can't, any of us who spend any time in the trenches on the internet know how much racists love to scream about crime statistics. Do we not get to cite crime statistics for anything anymore because racists like to bring those up all the time? It's just fucking,
yeah,
the world it's on its ear with this shit. It's
it
like
is.
it's when you can't, and here's the thing, man, when you get to the point where you can't have a discussion with without fear of being labeled with these things that are basically thought terminating cliches. You are I don't care if it's communist or freaking cuck. It's when you call somebody these things, you're basically you're eliminating the conversation. There's
Mhm.
nothing this person can say that's good.
I
That
don't entertain it in any
Yeah.
way, and I
And for
think that's the only way
science,
you can take it. It's like,
and for
you think I'm racist, you think I'm being racist, whatever. I'm not. I know I'm not. If you think I am, that is your opinion. It doesn't have to affect my personal perception of myself, whether or not you think it or not. And with, I should also say that just the way that he did that John Hoops, like an academic more than 2 times my age, is blocking me and then commenting below, utterly contemptuous. Like, I, I won't get too hard on him just because this is your channel, but like, I it's I don't have respect for a man that does things like that. It's very, like, the thought process towards wanting to do something like that is something that I had never even considered. I was legitimately just flabbergasted at what I was seeing. It was absolutely insane to me.
yeah, it's he's one of my least favorite people to be honest with you after watching the way that all this stuff is played out. He's so underhanded. He's like he's the kind of guy back in Duke Nukem 3D that would he would put trip mines in the places where you would spawn, so you would die the second you came in. That whole commenting on a thread when you're blocking somebody, that's just cheese dick shit, man.
Yeah.
It's just
John Hoops is a spawn camper. Get that
yeah.
trending.
John
Yeah,
Hoops is a
just
spawn camper. God damn
the one good thing to come out of my interaction with John Hoops is that I realized that Flint is not completely without merit, because there's somebody worse and with less courage, even, because just,
it.
at least Flint, you can at least commend Flint for going on Joe Rogan. I mean, that took a lot of guts. I'll
Yeah,
give him his flowers for that. It took a lot
yeah,
of guts to do that. And John Hoops has none. None.
yeah. No,
Um,
it's
yeah.
bad. And like even I have it on pretty good authority that Flint was fighting against the idea of and the Society for American Archaeology letter that was sent to Netflix. He tried to get them to tone down the language about racism in it, but Hoops wanted to push that one up to the top, and now Flint just he falls in line and supports it. But
And
that
John
was
Hoops
some
is a senior scholar to Dibble. by quite some time. He's much
Yes.
older and has been in the field. And now, and I think that that's kind of what screwed Dibble in this case, unfortunately, because without that, none of this would have been even close to as big of a deal.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
If
he
that,
can't retract it without giving up hoops. I
yeah,
don't know what
that's
your
right.
evidence is for this, so I'm taking it at face
No,
value. But
this
yeah.
was told to me in confidence. I've got
Mhm.
this weird situation going on where I've got a handful of archaeologists that tell me things that they don't want other people to know. One of them blocked me on Twitter, but follows, still emails me and stuff. But it's like they blocked me on Twitter to make sure that they are
For
keeping up
public appearances.
appearances. Yeah, it's kind of a
And what
fucked
does that tell
mess.
you about the way that they're perceived?
Yeah,
About the
exactly. Oh
way
yeah.
that dissenting opinions are perceived
Oh
in this
yeah.
field?
The stuff that one of the people has told me so much personal stuff that it's like if I was a TMZ channel, I could go fucking hog wild. But
Yeah.
that's not how. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and go, "Hey, can we keep it to the evidence, boys, and quit talking about these social issues and fucking all this shit," and then turn around and start talking crap about people's personal lives. But here, let's take care of this super chat here real fast. Ed Food text you. Oh, kudos, Dan, for posting the discussion. Illegitimate Scholar. I'm loving your attitude and approach, dude. I'm just about to click follow on your channel. Thanks for pointing me in his direction, Dan. Yeah, no problem. Ed Food text you later. I'm glad that you found Sam an enjoyable guy to talk to. I'm definitely having a good time and have liked his content for a bit now. And what we got here? What was the Mediterranean Sea dry during the Ice Age? What did the Nile flow into? I don't think it was.
No, it wasn't dry. It was lower, I think, by quite a bit, but it wasn't dry.
Yeah, there was. Yeah, that's what I was of the impression of too. But I'm not looking at a mirror. You're goddamn right,
I think
James.
much of that is sheer. So the actual coastline didn't change too much, if I'm remembering
Mm.
correctly, around most of the Mediterranean. It's like a difference of whether there were mountains there that allow it to get to a depth very quickly because it has a very steep decline.
That makes
most of
sense.
the Mediterranean.
Yeah, there's a big chunk of like Malta, half of it's that way. It was is cliff faces into the water.
Right. As opposed to
Gentle
east
slope.
of right east of England, there's this massive landmass that was there. Not Sunderland, but the other one. I forget the name of it right now.
Atlantis. But sorry, I couldn't help it.
It's okay. Yeah,
yeah. But yeah, that's
right there.
exactly. It's Camelot. What do you do? Yeah, shit's funny. It is funny to me. Like, I was having a discussion with a friend of mine a while back who's in meat space in the real world, and he's pretty skeptical of a lot of this stuff. Like when he watches, every now and again, he'll watch one of my videos and he'll be like, "Well, I'm glad you're doing well, man, but eventually you're going to need evidence for all that stuff." He doesn't the nuance of fact checking the academics and stuff. Just kind of like he doesn't get like it didn't really he didn't understand it, but we were talking about King Arthur one day, and he was telling me just how they knew all this. They knew it was a myth. They knew it was all bullshit and stuff. I'm like, no, man, that's not true. I mean, there's some guys that'll say it, but there's other guys that won't. And I start pulling that up, and he starts seeing that there was a little bit of an academic dissension. He's like, well, I watched this guy on TV that was saying that there was no debate. I'm like, oh yeah, let me tell you about those fucking guys that like to tell you there's no debate. Let me explain to you why I have a YouTube channel. Oh yeah, we know all this.
To connect that to Clovis first, Flint is right that that he's mostly right that like that was settled a long time ago. For most academics, there's not like statistics on this. I wish they'd take polls. I don't know why they don't on certain opinions. It would it would be a lot easier to understand what people actually think, especially if the polls were blind. But there are a few hangers on, some archaeologists that are still out there fighting that fight, claiming that all of this evidence is BS and Clovis first is still true. Even as recently as the last few years, I've seen, and they're not super significant, and I don't think they're taken seriously. But the other side of that is that a lot of this stuff wasn't changed in the textbooks for decades afterwards. There's likely students in the United States still being taught Clovis first, just because they're being taught older information. It takes a long time to flow down there. I graduated high school in 2013, and I was always only taught about Clovis first. And it had been debunked for you know, depending on what you consider the point, it was debunked 10, 15 years at that point.
Yeah.
And even the newer textbooks that I had, which were published after that, they hadn't updated that particular thing. Yeah, many such cases of that.
Yeah, that's, as I say, that's a very, very normal issue. One of the things I've talked about a lot, that because one of the accusations of white supremacy is the whole white Quetzalcoatl myth, right? Well, Graham
I have
Hancock's
something on that later
okay.
on.
Yeah, well, the idea that the Quetzalcoatl was a, the Quetzalcoatl myth was corrupted by the Spaniards. That's not that's not crazy, but this was
Agreed.
something that was not taught. I mean, I was in college in the, like, my first day of college, my day orientation was 9/11, like 2001 9/11, right? We're all standing in line getting our pictures taken with that face right there, just going, watching big ass fucking CRTs showing us the end of the world as far as we were concerned.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I hope it wasn't NYU.
no, it was Spokane Falls Community College. I'm poor white trash. But
even better one.
yeah, no, NYU would probably have been a bad day to be there.
Yeah.
But the like even way back then, it was the way that these things were. We were taught that the Quetzalcoatl myth was just like, this was the myth. There was no teaching of Spanish influence. Now, indigenous scholars were hammering on this shit since the 1950s, but it wasn't until the 90s that they were getting heard. 10 years later, I'm in college. Academics are well aware that this is the situation now, but that's not in my fucking $150 textbook. Oh, no, 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 no.
Mm-hmm.
I'm being told Quetzalcoatl myth, just regular old normal boring shit. And that's why I challenge these guys often, these academics, to pull up a book from the 2000s, from the 90s that discusses that. It's not for like high level academia, and of course they can't because they don't exist. Right? That was just the way the story was.
Right. And there are other examples in the archaeological, anthropological, culture anthropology. Like there's, first person interviews. You can't deny this when it's like there's a people where cargo cults happen on New Guinea, on the island. There's one example of people who are at a hunter-gatherer subsistence, maybe horticulturalist, maybe some a lot of pig stuff there, a lot of pig farming. They really did deify a white man in Prince Philip. They really did that. I mean, and they'll tell you that. And when I say they'll tell you that themselves, it's the people that did it, not the descendants of the people that did it. This wasn't something that people went in and did that. And in one of these examples, in the cults of John Frum, who's an amalgamation, thought to be an amalgamation of American soldiers, as well as of Prince Philip, that are related on the same island. This new cult, which preserved a lot of indigenous traditions in it, it changed it. Again, culture is dynamic. This stuff changes. This was a massive threat to the colonial officials of the island. When this happened, it was actually a move of liberation from colonial forces rather than the other way around, when they adopted this idea of this white guy who they viewed as from their island, by the way. Eventually they did. Like, people stopped participating in the colonial economy. A lot of them were jailed, and that only strengthened the cult. And all of this happened 60, 70 years ago, and it's still going on today. So there's a precedent for this happening. I don't know. And in fact, I think probably not is like what happened. I think it's a good argument that this was imposed on them, but you also can't blame Graham Hancock for not understanding that.
Yeah, it wasn't even taught. It wasn't taught to me, and I'm 30 years his junior, right?
Yeah.
So,
and there was also precedence for this. There was precedence for this in that white Quetzalcoatl, not as a white skin color, but as these gods, many of them in these traditions of Mesoamerica, in the Olmecs, in the Aztecs, in the Mayans, different other traditions, the Tlaxcala, the Toltecs, like they have their versions of these gods, just as there's a Greek version and a Roman version of like what is thought to be the same god. And these gods are associated with cardinal directions, different ones for different peoples, which are also associated with color. And there is precedent for Quetzalcoatl being associated with white, not as a skin color, but with white, which makes this a very small jump, or even a possible simple misunderstanding of the Spanish officials that did it. But yeah.
No, that's a very good point. That's a very good point. I love the cargo cult reference. The cargo cults are always something that they've fascinated the crap out of me. It's great for, especially for a touchstone for this whole conversation, because it is a very real example of what sufficiently advanced technology, how it is treated by indigenous people when it shows up that don't have anything. A little bit quick, let's address what local enterprise broadcasting. Thank you much, my friend. What do we got here? What's the possibility that the ancient Egyptians deforested their surrounding area? Could they have done something similar to the former inhabitants of Easter Island? Just a theory I've had. Well, actually, the last thing, some of the most recent evidence I've seen on Easter Island saying that they didn't actually deforest the place. That
Yes.
it was, yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. So actually, this is something that I thought that this was settled. I had learned about, I knew about the deforestation idea on Rapa Nui, Easter Island, same place, different names. I like to use the indigenous name first and then do the common name. And so, not that anyone else needs to adhere to that, by the way. I should make that very clear. That's how I do it. I don't control how other people do it. So this was an argument for a long time, and I haven't looked at this in like 5 years. I thought this was over, maybe 4 years. Somebody like had talked about this a long time ago, and I learned today that, or the last few weeks, is this entered into discussion that this was a thing that people still believe to be true. But it doesn't seem to be well supported. There's a lot of evidence of those trees surviving well into when Europeans had landed on Rapa Nui. So the deforestation doesn't happen until much later. And there's some details about how it happened differently. But I think it is quite tied in with colonialism. Not that everything is, but many things are, especially with changing subsistence. But to regardless of if that's true, with your comparison in the Nile Valley, right?
Yeah, Egypt.
Yeah.
Yes.
So the idea of deforestation happening on an island is a lot more believable to me, and I think in general, than deforestation in a river valley, because they're very, very isolated from other places. I don't believe it would be reasonable that all of the trees in the Nile Valley would be cut down. It's still very unlikely on a place like Rapa Nui, because it's a relatively large island, but it's scores in orders of magnitude more smaller in one, and then also isolated from other places for another. So that would never happen in the Nile. It's just too large. You would just have it happening based on wilds, unless you like made it into a city like Coruscant that just went all along the Nile.
Well, that makes sense. That's I wouldn't argue with that either. I mean, they are limited to the delta and the river itself, but even still, Egypt tended to be pretty good about organizing its resources and stuff. It was kind of with it long. I mean, long enough ago that the Greeks were tripping on the Egyptians when they went there, right? They were like, "Holy shit, how'd they do all this cool stuff?" So, I think that it does seem more along the lines of what you said, that they probably didn't deforest the whole area.
Yeah.
What do we got here from Rhodes Song? How many different text similarities are found between the various megalithic cultures? Nodules, drill tubes, polygonal blocks, anything else? Well, some of the things we see, the polygonal masonry is pretty ubiquitous. We see the nubs and the metal clamps. We see those show up in quite a lot of these places as well. Can you think of other features that you would see associated with that stuff, Sam?
I don't study as much of this as you guys do
Yeah.
on this stuff. My channel is supposed to be cultural anthropology. I fell into this out of seeing somebody lie about old boats, and old boats are my thing. You don't screw with old boats. You can't do it. Not in my presence.
Well, welcome to the nut house. So,
by the way, my video on maritime archaeology is almost exclusively archaeological papers. I'm not going out here on crackpot theories. I'm showing the work of the way they want to argue, which is within the methods of mainstream archaeologists. And I did that, and I show in those videos that Flint was wrong about some things and lying about others. And I think that's well supported. And that is not slander. That is my opinion.
Yes.
Yeah. Flint
it's
doesn't
not.
seem to understand what slander is, by the way.
No, it's yeah. It's the accusations that have been made against me are like where he says that I'm harassing him is so hilarious because it's like all these people are like, why aren't you reporting him? Why aren't you trying to sue him for the things that he said about the handling of indigenous bones that were in violation of NAGPRA? Well, because I didn't say what Flint says I did. I didn't say Flint did.
Yeah.
I said he may have, and certainly one of his
Yes.
colleagues did, because the university said that they had people in the faculty doing it. So,
Right.
but so if anybody could sue anybody for lying there, but I mean, come on, this is the internet, man. I ain't about to start suing people. But
Right.
yeah, I see that comment all the time. You're going to get sued, blah blah blah. Like, Jesus fucking Christ. But yes, the text similarities. There's the scoop marks and a few other things too. The ones that the nubs and the nubs and the clamps are the two that always interest me because they seem to show up so many different places and so often with the same kind of stonework. But that's stuff that Sam doesn't know enough about, guys, for us to have a big conversation. I don't want to just preach to him about it. So you're not Keanu Reeves and I'm not Flint Dibble. So
fair enough.
I'm not here to win you over to real archaeology.
Yeah. I just, to me, I don't have this association with like my opinions on and my interpretation of the record and of what I've read. I've understand each individual person has their own set of things they've read. There's things that you and I have both read and learned. There's things that you have read that I've not. There's things that I have read that you have not. And that's true of any interaction between two people, unless you're Siamese conjoined twins. I don't think we're allowed to say Siamese anymore.
I'm not sure.
It's a cool word, but like conjoined twins in that context. I think Siam is a better name than Thailand, but that's a different argument.
Don't think you get Disney
on the
mad
logic. On the topic of the sufficient technology, we moved a little away from it, but I do want to say that one of these things that comes out when we're talking about this, from a lot of like, I'll talk to everybody on Twitter. I got everybody, like from commies to far right people. I kind of draw the lines at tankies and Nazis. That's where it's like gets too much.
Yeah.
So I'll interact with everybody most of the time, and if something bothers me, I just want to interact with it. But one of the things that I hear a lot of is there's some people who will say like that the cargo cult thing of like them, of the people in Melanesia creating these ideas surrounding people arriving on their shores with all of these goods, that it's evidence that they're stupid or something. And it's not, because any person, right? Any person, any culture, when they have new information given to them, it changes the way that people interact with the world, the way that they interact with each other. This is a very broad thing. The definition of technology in anthropology is much more broad than it is colloquially. So something like a political organization, the way that people organize themselves politically, is a technology. A road in something like Qin Shi Huangdi's early Chinese Empire, as well as in the Roman Empire, a road stretching very far is a technology in a very real way, because it also has practical implications for the way that a political institution is able to rule effectively and practically over a large area. So it's, and that's the point about that. But the point about how the new technology changes the way that people interact with the world. In most places, as they develop new technology, it builds on the things of the past over time, and it changes over generations. But then when you have these insane technologies that took thousands of years to develop, building on ancient technology, you have like the railroad that is built as far back and even has the same width as Roman carts riding it like 2,000 years prior, right? So they're all built on each other. And then you take that level of technology that you have and you bring it to a people who are anatomically modern humans, but they've never seen a factory. They've never seen a car. They've never seen a plane, much less. They've never seen boats made of metal coming in and dropping off people wearing clothes they've never seen, with weapons that they've never even conceived of. And, any person If you did the same thing to people in the Baltics or in Europe 2,000 years ago with the level of technology that they had in the 1900s, it would look in it would be in a similar way perceived by these people. Of course it would be, because it's a ridiculous level of technology that they have no cultural understanding for. And what they're going to do is, with this new interaction, and unfortunately in many places this level of introduction, instead of happening gradually, it happens immediately, and this is hugely destructive. It doesn't allow a little bending in the culture that it interacts with. It usually involves a breaking of it. I like to think of cultures adopting a new culture as like you have a rod, a metal or some alloy rod, and it has a certain level of rigidity and it has a certain level of give. But if it's too rigid and you bend it too much, it's going to break. If it's not rigid enough and you bend it, it's worthless. It's just you can bend it whichever way you want because it doesn't matter. So it's not functional as a rod because it's just going to bend. So there's a sweet spot for that. But even when there's a sweet spot for a culture in that metaphorical sense, if you have an interaction with something like the level of technology of the 1900s with no prior understanding of how that culture was created, no acculturation, no gradual introduction, or being a child growing up in that society that interacts with these things from when they're a child, then of course they're going to fit their understanding of this crazy stuff, no matter how many times they're told with these weird words they've never heard about how they put this magic ancient black liquid in, and it makes steam and it makes them like, no, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
They're not going to understand that, and they shouldn't understand that, and that doesn't mean that they're dumb. And
No, it just means that they have it.
slash rant.
No, you're fine. That's absolutely, it makes perfect sense. Like it's um like I dealt with old tech on eBay. I still do a little bit of like that's what I basically sold on eBay was like old technology, like outdated video game systems and media players and whatnot. And you deal with the same kinds of issues where people they don't know the stuff just because they don't know the stuff. It's not because they're dumb. Like when I had a guy one time email me that he wanted to buy something, but he wanted to make sure that the fidelity on it was good. And it's like, how many pixels is it? And it's like, I wanted to email him back and go, one, dude, it's a fucking player from 1976. The fidelity's shit. The fuck are you even asking me for?
Yeah. Yeah.
They didn't make good players back then unless it was filmed. But a lot of little things like that where people wonder if you can make a adapter for Laserdisc player to VHS, Betamax player to VHS, all these things where the standards they're not compatible. It's just not going to happen. But it's not because the people are stupid if they're asking the question. They just simply don't know any better. And
Right.
but that's frequently when somebody's trying to win a point against you by saying that you're socially a terrible person because you're a racist or whatever, of course that's a nice fat thread for them to pull on.
Right. Absolutely. And it also shows their unwillingness or inability to argue within the actual information. And they have to go to an ad hominem attack. They have to associate you with something, which I think is very weak. But that's also my opinion. And I'm willing to understand that other people have a different way of viewing the world. I want a baseline level of respect. And I don't feel that you are getting that. I don't feel I'm getting that. And I'm willing to give it as soon as, there is a certain level of mutual respect between us. I have a rule in my Discord, and that rule is do not call anybody anything they don't want to be called. So this applies to dead naming someone who is trans. I don't think we have anybody in the Discord who is, but if there ever is, dead naming would not be allowed in my server. And I know some people would have a problem with that. Dead naming or misgendering somebody. But it doesn't just apply to that. It applies to anything. You just don't call someone they don't want to be called. And I wouldn't do that. I do it now. I call Flint a pseudo-archaeologist. But the only reason I do that is because it's funny, because he did that first to Graham. And I'm demonstrating that you can just apply these labels.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a general rule. Don't call people things they don't want to be called. Ever.
Yeah,
Like
not complicated. Yeah, not complicated.
Right.
Like we were saying earlier, it's if you want to interact with people, there's just like certain basic things that you just kind of have to either accept or understand that if it's a deal breaker, then don't deal with some. If to take the trans thing, since that's such a hot button thing for the last, if dead naming somebody's such a big deal, then don't talk to people that you're going to have to. That's just fucking. That's how it's going to be. Don't go finding trans people to talk to. Don't go out of your way to engage with them. And I'm not saying don't talk to trans people when you meet them, but don't go fucking looking for them. Like I don't know, like these guys tend to look for us. It's not you ask Keanu Reeves. You fucking hide your info, and motherfuckers will still look for you.
Seriously.
All right. Ed Fu texts you later, wants to go back to the Montezuma thing real quick. If Cortez was Quetzalcoatl, doesn't that mean color of skin was not an issue? From my memory, Quetzalcoatl was a Toltec myth inherited by the Aztecs, isn't it?
Well, it goes back at least to the Olmecs, right? It's and I think it's possible it was adopted from the Mayans. The Mayans had a very long history. The Mayans are my favorite, by the way, of these groups, which you can probably tell because Chichen Itza is the cover photo of my Twitter. But so I am biased towards the Mayans. That's why I'm saying that. But my perception is that it might have come from the Toltecs for the Aztecs, but I think ultimately it came from it likely came from the Mayans by way of the Olmecs, who are generally thought to be the progenitor. And then before that, we don't really know. Because there are a lot of similarities between them, and we don't really know if Montezuma actually thought that he was a god.
That's right.
One of the possibilities is that a lot of people perceived him to be a god, and again, this idea at least makes sense based on the technology they're seeing being these huge ships that they've never seen before. The other thing about that is I think a lot of the times when archaeologists today, there's a bias towards the Abrahamic religions, in the sense that they understand religion and what God is through the lens of, nominally these Abrahamic and monotheistic religions. But for a people like the Aztec or a people in Melanesia, many of these, the Aztec had some elements of animism. They weren't necessarily animistic as a term, which is an extraordinarily broad term, and it isn't really used anymore in academia. But like the understanding of there being spirits is spirits in everything, either living things or also places, rocks, trees. There's different iterations of this in cultures around the world, and it is not a big jump to I don't know about the Aztecs specifically, but I know that they're at least polytheistic. So it's likely less so a big jump to deify an individual when you already have individuals in your own society that are deified or have a larger amount of spiritual energy or mana. This is where a lot of ritualistic cannibalism comes from. It comes from consuming the energy of the other person. It doesn't. There's the other kind of cannibalism is like law of the sea type stuff for survival. That's a separate thing. Most of this cannibalism is ritualistic and done in different places. All of these continents, all of them happened in Europe before Christianity. It happens in Africa today. It still happens. And in other continents, it happens in Europe today. Less, but it does happen. If you look for it, it's happening. But it's not that crazy that they would think that this guy's a god. It's not like they think that he's the one true Abrahamic God. No one ever claimed that. This is a bias of our own society's religious understanding of the world. This is a Tuesday. It's not a big deal. Yeah. Like a regular war leader is going to be deified to a certain extent, having a greater amount of this like midichlorian type energy that we're talking about. That's the second Star Wars reference this episode.
Look at you go. Look at that. Episode 2. Cliff, sorry, the sign is mine. He's referring to my nuclear Presidential Commission on Nuclear Testing. I've got this goofy ass sign that I've
I've seen it in your videos.
Cliff wants it. But no, you can't have it. Nope. That was weird. I got in a box. Like I bought all this random video game posters and shit like 15 years ago, and like just tons of like weird posters and shit, like this PlayStation poster right up there behind me. And in the bottom of the box was just a bunch of goofy shit, and that sign was one of the things. I was like, oh fuck, that's a cool thing in there.
I would have picked that up too.
Oh yeah, had to have it.
That's like a Thor hair doll, first edition.
Yeah, yeah, man. Oh man, I can't.
I'm not trading
Lucky you
them.
got that cheap. Yeah, no kidding. Lucky you got that cheap, man. The bookstores around here are fucking savage on that stuff. They are like. I was looking through a bunch of papers on the channeled scablands and stuff. There's a place that's got a bunch of the old geology books and stuff for it, and they just wanted like $80 a pop. I was just like, come on, man.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And you want to go to small businesses, right? But sometimes they're just not being reasonable, especially when you can get it online for $40. And
that's what really gets me is it's like, I mean, shouldn't you be running your storefront selling those things you can't really sell online, and then like put that online for $40 and then put it out here for 45 or something like that, even 35?
Yeah,
whatever. At any rate, they
especially
still got
when there's
those.
less costs associated with that. But yeah,
Less cost and less hassle. As a guy who sells shit on eBay, man, I've sold stuff on Craigslist. If I sell a guy a video game on Craigslist, goodbye, dude. Have a nice day. If I sell a guy a video game on eBay, 6 months later, I might get a fucking box full of farts sent back, and they take the money out of my account. You know, so it's a whole big difference.
Yeah.
Oh, good Lord. Mandy's having a lot of fun in there. She's just stirring the pot, but it seems like everybody's having a good time slapping her around or him around. I'm pretty sure Mandy's a troll. So
okay.
Have fun,
Mandy,
guys.
Specifically to you, Mandy, and anyone else, because I've had this open offer for 2 months. I think I don't know how long it is actually. I think it's over a month at this point. But I've had this open offer of anybody can come on my channel and have a live conversation with me if they want to argue against the evidence that I have in my 2 videos on Flint. This is any archaeologist or anyone else who thinks that they're correct. Come on, have a live conversation, not a debate. We can disagree, but respectfully. I'm not Steven Crowder. We're not doing that kind of stuff. We're just going to have a conversation. You're welcome to come on, and please do it. And I don't know why no one's taken me up on it at this point.
Mandy says that she'll happily come on your show Friday. There you go. You've got. I wouldn't.
Okay.
Yep.
Reach out to me on Twitter.
There you go. So the link is in the description, Mandy. It'll be great. No, that's good. Honestly, it would be nice. It would be nice to see some archaeologists actually address these things that Flint has been accused of saying, since they want to play the he hasn't said it. It would be nice to see them address them without just engaging in abject apologism or just ignoring the fucking evidence. That, like the metallurgy thing, I am so like Flint has got that one twisted to the point where they're all over Twitter like talking about this shit wrong, where I actually have to every single archaeologist I've argued with about this that will see the argument through to actually explaining where the isotopes come from and how they differentiate natural from anthropogenic lead, they always end up at the same point. Well, yeah, without an archaeological site, they can't really test for metallurgy back then, but they never will actually. That's not going to ever get admitted. They always end up waffling on but that's what they're saying, and they know that's what they're saying. They know that Flint basically made an overarching claim that he couldn't back up. And that's not the lie. I've tried to get this thing said numerous times. When Flint said, we know for a fact that there was no large-scale metallurgy in the Ice Age, that wasn't a lie. That was a mistake. Putting a fucking graph on the screen that's from 2,000 years ago and claiming that it's from, and talking about Ice Age metallurgy, that's the lie. That's like me holding up.
Also going on multiple other times and telling people on video as well as on Twitter that you provided sources for every single claim that you made. And I understand he made other claims in conversation, but this was a planned claim. So it's not like he made that up as he was going based on a response to Graham. This was part of his presentation. So I don't understand how he got there, unless he misunderstood the Roman period with the Ice Age, which I don't think that is very likely.
No, it was a shell game. It was just kind of a smoke and mirrors. It was you hold up, this is what you're going to get. And then, but that's not really what you get. It just looks close. It was pretty underhanded, but the way it's gone that way, went that way all the way through. And the way that he's reacted to it so many times you see it live where he's just yelling in an environment like we're having now, where he's yelling about this thing, and he consistently misrepresents, consistently just, I've made sure that he said he's made sure that his current university is the first hit on Google when you look it up, and it's not. But he said that it was. He said that he made sure of it, but he just said it off of the cuff because he was pissed off and he was trying to defend himself. But that says a lot. If you're in a debate and you get in a live conversation and you're like, well, shit, I'm just going to say whatever the fuck it takes to defend myself, truth be damned, you're going to get accused of lying sometimes, man. That's just what's going to happen. I don't know what to say.
Yeah. The other thing is that Google is different for different people now. Maybe 20 years ago, I think 20 plus years ago, it would have been different, but I just did it right now. I searched Flint Dibble on Google, and the links are Flint Dibble's Twitter, his Archaeology YouTube, and then number 3 is Dartmouth.
Yep.
Number 4 is an article he wrote, and number 5 is Cardiff.
There you go.
See, he currently works, I think.
And now this is I will admit, I made a mistake watching the Joe Rogan video because I wasn't looking for the about info at the beginning. So I missed the part when Flint said that he worked at Cardiff, because that was not literally, that was not at all what I was focused on. I just assumed when I got to the part where I was like, I wonder where Flint works, I just Google it, and the top hit was Dartmouth. So I thought it was Dartmouth, and that is my mistake. But
yeah, and that's fine. It's a mistake,
it's a mistake.
It's a different thing than what Flint's done, and you're willing to admit when you've made a wrong statement, just like I am, and I have, and I will again. Being wrong is an opportunity to learn. It's an okay thing. It's something everybody's going to do,
and it's something that, in all honesty, I think that people online, like, you know, back in my day, but I come from a generation where like sports heroes, like Charles Barkley, got in deep shit, and it was like a huge thing because he said that I'm not a hero to your children, and it was a big deal because it was like athletes are supposed to be heroes to kids, right? This is in the 90s,
right?
So, but back in my day, like if you were in a public sphere, you were supposed to be like somewhat, you were supposed to be responsible for how you were perceived and how that you were supposed to understand that people would emulate you to a degree. So admitting you're wrong is kind of like, it's kind of paramount. If I've 43,000 subscribers almost, if 0.01% of them walk away and either admit that they're wrong or don't admit that they're wrong based on the stuff that I do, I mean, that gives me some influence on the planet. And so to me, it just seems inept that somebody who's like the whole fucking point of the scientific method is you admit you're wrong, you revamp, you go forward, you move on, you never let it knock you down. We just keep learning. Even wrong information is good information. Let's go, buddy. And that's not at all what they're given from us. It's just ego, ego.
And the Royal Society, very early science stuff, 17th century, natural science, this type of thing, I think. Like, it was very different back then. This is only less than 400 years ago, but it was very, very different. It was even very different 100 years ago. But their motto is nullius in verba, which is take nobody's word for it. And, you know, I adhere to that. I love that quote. I love science. I love learning. I love archaeology and anthropology. And it's unfortunate that has been lost in the weeds, in my perception.
No, I agree with you. I love that stuff too. I'm not, because I talk shit about some people doesn't mean that I don't love the science. It's quite the opposite. And I have nothing but respect for even a painstakingly built hypothesis like Clovis first ends up being wrong. It's like I was saying earlier about Dr. Martin Sweatman, the Archaeostronomy hypothesis I was talking about. It gets a lot of shit. Okay, it gets a lot of shit, but there's a possibility that it's got some truth to it, and he doesn't start from nothing. I get a lot of shit from archaeologists, especially when they talk to me more, asking me how could I entertain that? And it's like, I don't have to believe that it's 100% true necessarily in order to believe that it's a potentially valid hypothesis. We're talking about a site that's 10,000, 12,000 fucking years old, man. We got a lot of wiggle room for interpretation here. I don't need one theory. As a matter of fact, I'll pretty much guarantee if you guys just come out and say, oh, it's just a skull cult, Gobekli Tepe is a skull cult, you are just simmering that down to its nothing. There's more to it than that. So yeah, but that's insulting to, especially because archaeoastronomy has traditionally been mathematicians. It's usually a mathematician that comes in there and sticks their nose in, and then the archaeo has, up until recently, the archaeo was kind of took the back seat. It was
Yeah,
astronomy first.
that makes sense. It does make sense, but it's, and that shows between different fields the different ways that they evaluate information, because a mathematician being trained to care about what the numbers say, and then the mathematician looks at it and is like, oh, the numbers show that it is highly statistically unlikely for this to be made by accident, and that that is evidence of whatever it is, of them intending to create this orientation when the orientation was at a different point, so it dates the site differently. But that in archaeology, that's not considered evidence, so it's not taken in the same way. But it's unfortunate, to me, quite a bit, because I want to know the truth. I don't care who's right. I want to know what's going on. I love this stuff.
Yeah, that's really what it is right there. Is it doesn't matter. I don't care if Thor Heyerdahl's right, Graham Hancock's right, Flint Dibble's right, or Gandhi's right. I just want to know what the fuck happened, and as best as we can. And as long as anytime we're going to get egos between us and the truth, I mean, that's the kind of the whole point of science, right? Is like you replicate the experiences over and over and over again. You repeat the same shit, numerous different people looking at the same thing, and they should basically see the same thing. And this is a means of removing ego. We no longer, your personal biases mean fuck all, because 10,000 other people don't all share your biases and they all saw it too. But when they try to whittle it down into this, the handful of, you got to go through the filter of the expert. That's where you do end up running into a whole different, it's stifling. There's no room. It's going to stagnate things. You're not going to be allowed to move forward. Fucking Lee Berger did that. Did you see the Cave of Bones on Netflix?
No, I didn't.
Oh fuck, that was cool. The Homo Nideli, and they've got this like cave where it looked like they were burying themselves, like burying their dead, and it looked like they had to use fire to get there and shit. And oh boy, did he get all kinds of shit from the same people that yell at Graham Hancock because he dared say something that was not quite. All of it wasn't perfectly backed up exactly the way that they would have liked it to be before he went public with it. Basically, long story short, he got more publicity for saying he understands how to get people like us interested in fucking stifling old archaeology, where these other guys are having a hard time with it, so they're all pissy about it. That's basically what it came down to. That's basically what.
And we were talking about incentives before. It makes sense because there is no incentive for professors who are tenured, and people are generally taking their classes. They're obviously, if you're taking a major, then it's an area of interest for you. Of varying degrees based on what college it is, what the class is, whatever. But like they are not harmed by people not enjoying their class. Their incentive structure, and this is the same thing with secondary school teachers, and one of the reasons why I got my teaching certification and just dipped out of my master's and was like, I'm not going to do this. Your incentive structure is towards other things. In the case of professors, it's towards the department, and often towards even research and not teaching. Your incentive structure is not towards entertaining people on a YouTube channel and getting them interested in what you're saying. And what we do also has negatives. What we do is to do entertainment. And sometimes what can happen is, and this is in general with anybody who's doing this type of thing on YouTube, I'm not even thinking of any specific situations, but this is theoretical. People can respond in a way that they're doing it towards their incentive structure of getting more views, which provides them with more money. There's a clear incentive there. So that can be a negative for guys like us. But it's also that we have an incentive to entertain and provide high production value and provide engaging titles and thumbnails. You and I have both been attacked for our thumbnails, and it's like, dude, I'm doing, like, number one, it's just my style. Like, I think it's funny, whatever. But like, we're YouTubers. This is our thing. You want to talk about, like, you want to be the only people that can talk about your thing. And then it's like, you're getting in our thing and giving us crap for it. Like, we understand how to make thumbnails. We have to make what works or it doesn't work. Just like you have to do certain things in your field. Like,
and it's the stuff that complaining about the picture of, like, I got a picture of Hoops with his head opened up and me poking at his brain, like fucking. Oh no! Oh my! I mean, come on, you guys! Jesus
It's just
Christ.
a metaphor, dude. What do they think you're gonna do? Like, do some Silent Hill stuff and go over to Kansas and
Yeah, this is exactly.
that's
That's
not
exactly.
what are you talking about, man?
It's a points to complain about. It was his video responding to me was a hit piece that was completely full of shit, and
Oh, I
it's
didn't
pretty.
even know he made videos.
Oh, Flint.
Oh, I thought you were
Oh,
talking
okay,
about
sorry.
John Hoops.
No, sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry. Flint's the one that complained about. He made the complaint about that thumbnail.
Yes,
That
right.
response was just
Like a
full of
good little
like.
lapdog he did.
Oh yeah, just full of complaints about the same, and so full of shit. Just so full of those bold-faced lies to the point where it's hilarious. It's just so full circle. It's like I criticize him for using bad science to debunk bad science, and it takes us all the way back to he lies about me to defend himself for lying. It's just Jesus fucking Christ. You can't even make this shit up, man.
Right. Seriously.
Well, thank you there, Benjamin. I appreciate it. Once again, thanks for your time and effort. I prefer giving you my money than Flint. He cuts himself off from private funding effectively. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. You can, I will take his money anytime. Well, that's not a threat to steal from you, Flint. Fucking put the phone to the police down. Jesus Christ.
He's already making a video right now.
He's already
I got him.
He's
going to come and rob me in
from
England at gunpoint. He's coming to Cardiff. He said he was going to steal my money.
Thank God he still thinks I'm at fucking the other place. Oh,
yeah,
God.
yeah.
He thinks I'm at Dartmouth. I'm safe.
We should do that. We should take a road trip to Dartmouth together and be like, we're here to find Flint Dibble.
Steal all of his money. God damn it.
Yeah,
Dude.
steal all of his money and at the same time break in and we're repatriating the indigenous remains. We're giving them back. That's what we're doing. We're bone Robin Hoods.
Yes, that's right. Have you tested this shit? Why the fuck not? It is honestly a really funny one, because if you study NAGPRA, I've heard you talk about it a little bit on your streams, but if you look into the history of how NAGPRA got passed, archaeology and anthropology, NAGPRA had its occasional champion in there. Don't get me wrong; it wasn't a monolith, but by and large, they were drug kicking and screaming into that shit. They wanted fuck all to do with NAGPRA every step of the way, everything up until it was getting the label of NAGPRA. And then it was like they'd finally gotten it to where little PC culture seems to have crept in, and they knew they needed to shut their cake holes.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it was a good law, dude. I mean, I've talked about the reasons, the videos that I've done on NAGPRA. Shout out Good Old Boys. I did it with them. They're another podcast. They're more like classical guys. They talk about a lot of different stuff. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but they're friends of mine. And one of the guys is really interested in anthropology, so I've been on with them like 3 times. They or NAGPRA. I've done stuff about the changes, the administrative changes to NAGPRA. That's on my channel, linked below. Again, I'm getting, like, that's the way you think when you do this. You're
when
just
you're
like,
a YouTuber.
yep, that's a time for a plug. Yeah. Yeah. Flint was giving out in that JRE episode, by the way. He was giving out more shout outs than like a rapper on the radio. It was crazy. But which is a good thing. I think you should give your flowers to your friends. I like it. I've shouted you out before. Yeah. But regardless, but originally, like, there was a lot of grave robbing going on of specifically Native Americans, and this law addressed that. Now, the changes that happened in late 2023 went into effect in early 2024 are what I kind of raised the flag on. And as far as I know, I'm really the only person publicly that's been talking about this. And to be clear, the SAA, the same one that you've talked about before, they also criticized this rule change, and I think for good reason. They kind of, to give you the shortest version of it, I think I have a conversation 40 minutes about the changes in the history of it. They made it 100% down to the indigenous officials of federally recognized tribes. So there's no science talked about, and this doesn't now just apply to grave goods and actual remains. So that would be archaeological remains and those found are the actual bones themselves, as well as the archaeological remains that are found in the context of that body, assumed to be grave goods buried with that individual. But it also now applies to anything they ever made. And this applies to how they're allowed to be displayed in museums. And
Yep.
this is now done completely under the allowance and the approval, and with no time limit for the specific federally recognized Native American, the representatives chosen by the federally recognized Native American governments, which they're governments, they can be corrupt like anyone else. Just saying.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
It's up to them entirely. The time limit, there's no time limit. They don't have to do anything. If they are allowed to be displayed, they have to be displayed exactly how they want to,
Yep.
or exactly how the indigenous representatives want to. And I'm all for indigenous autonomy, truly am. But this is an overstretch, and the SAA agrees with me on that.
Yeah, I wouldn't argue with that either. It's kind of I talk a lot about the kind of the psychology behind these exchanges and stuff, and it's a great example of if you look at NAGPRA, they've almost every university in this country, if you look up anthropology, if it's got an anthropology or an archaeology department that's over 100 years old, and you Google that university and you add NAGPRA to it, you're almost all of them, you find some violation where they've drugged their feet on repatriating the bones. Okay, they're all of them. Like it's to the point where when I argue with an archaeologist on Twitter and they come and they start talking fucking shit about racism, it's the first thing I do is Google whatever, because I know it's just a go-to. Your university, it's every single one of them. Your university's got a fucking problem because they were told they needed to repatriate these bones and they were studying these bones, so they just kind of like drug their feet, and then like a guy retires and this box ends up over there, and my point is they didn't do a very good job of following up. It's 34 years old. The whole generation has retired since NAGPRA's been passed. Not like they've come in and retired, and NAGPRA still isn't fucking taken care of. So I am quite certain that I'm not an indigenous activist, of course. I'm not even, my finger's not even on that pulse. But if I was Native American, that was something that I had a hard on for, I would be zero trust for these fucking institutions. We gave them a whole generation. They didn't fucking do it. Yeah. Fuck you guys. Give us the reins. So yeah. I once again, I have to say, you fucking archaeologists fuck shit up by not like thinking about PR. You guys need to get your heads out of the fucking ivory towers and like realize that you have to deal with other people in this world. And we don't all think like you do. And you're not always right.
Right. Yeah. And this is something that you actually brought to my attention. I was under the impression up until literally this is like last week I learned this, and I would describe myself as somewhat like of an, I wouldn't identify as an activist in any way, but I do consider myself very, we'll say like that's something that's important to me, is indigenous peoples and their rights. That is very important to me. And if you watch my content, you know that. I talk about it. Not just you, but anybody listening to this. It's and there's a stat that I've read that it's over 91% that have been repatriated. And I was under the impression that the last remaining percent was for some other reason, like maybe they couldn't find a tribe that's even related to it, or maybe it's like, or maybe they just don't care about certain things. Like I thought of that number as noise, and now I'm rethinking that, and I'm surprised I didn't know about this before. It's because I really, really do agree with the original law. It's like apparently H.W. Bush's father stole the head of Geronimo, who was a very famous. Like, and I think that's a rumor. I don't think that's confirmed, but there's some evidence for it.
Yeah, but even if it's not, it doesn't need to be that. There was numerous examples of, I forget the one lady's name, but she saw her grandfather's grave goods in a museum where she's like, my grandpa was fucking buried in these cocksuckers. Why am I looking at this shit? So yeah, this is like, yeah. Look that one up when we're done here. Look that one up. She saw her. I want to say it was the Smithsonian, even, because it seems like it was like a sticking point, because the Smithsonian's immune from NAGPRA. You know that, right? The Smithsonian's immune. Yeah. Oh yeah. They don't hide giant bones in the Smithsonian. They hide Indian bones in the Smithsonian. Yeah,
I
the
didn't
Smithsonian.
know that. How did I not know that?
Yeah, it's one of those. There is so many little. This is one of the funniest things to me about the whole conspiracy theory world is that there are so many things that are conspiracy theory sounding that are so fucking real, man. That are just like right up in your nose. Yeah, the fucking they're immune for it. I forget the exact how all it is, but any indigenous shit that's there is the U.S. government. It ain't going back to fucking no tribes, no time, no way, no ever.
Dude, that's really bad. And that's
Yeah.
like, whenever I talk about this type of thing, it's like it's ignored by the same types of people we've been talking about this entire time. It's often just ignored. Or if it's referenced, it's like they perceive, just because they perceive me as conservative, even though I don't really, I maybe I am, but it's like I don't really identify as that. I have views all over the place, like radical centrism type thing. But
Mm-hmm.
like there seems to be an attempt, or at least they actually seem to believe that my concern for these types of things are not genuine because of other beliefs that they've seen me have, or other things I've said. I guess I'm speculating, but I'm like, I really do care. I care a lot. These things are terrible. Seeing your grandfather's bones in a museum that's a traumatic experience for somebody to have. Like if that happened to me, I would be furious. I'd be breaking glass.
Yeah, it would be absolutely the kind of thing that would make you want to break glass. Like I just really quickly.
Especially,
Oh,
sorry, go
sorry.
ahead.
Oh, I
But
just Googled it real fast here, and it's the Smithsonian Institution is not subject to NAGPRA, but repatriates under the National Museum of the American Indian Act of 1989. So they
when
do
they
do
want
some.
to
Yes, they
is
do some
is the key
repatriation.
implication that, yeah.
Well, yeah, yeah. If you've done the studying of this stuff, for those who don't watch that Indian Act of 1989 had basically all it's the opposite of what we've got just right now. The archaeologists held all the cards, and the tribes
Mhm.
basically got to show up and say, "We think you should," and then they were like, "Okay, get the fuck out of here. We're going to do whatever we want."
Yeah.
So
And in
that,
NAGPRA originally there was like committees and things to decide who was correct, and all the evidence was weighted separately. It was like or like individually they would look at the evidence. Now it's just 100% Native Americans.
yep,
They still have the other groups in there, the other types of scientists and archaeologists, but they only get into it if the Native Americans are like, yeah, whatever. In certain
yeah,
cases, that's the only time they get into it, and but that's for real. Like that's in there,
yeah.
in better language. Gosh, I forgot what I was going to say.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I sort of say especially. No, that's okay. I didn't mean to interrupt you when
No,
I
you're
did
fine.
that. But
I just wanted to pull that up.
yeah, it was especially the oh, culture, right? Like if you in our own culture, I think we care a lot less about how we bury the dead. A lot of them are cremated now. It's less. It's my perception that today, even 100 years ago in our own culture, very much less of a thing that's valued. But if you're coming from an indigenous culture, this is and the word indigenous itself has been very politicized. But if you're coming from any culture, we won't even put indigenous on it. Any culture that has certain taboos and certain beliefs associated with the burying of the dead, and this is every culture ever, up until today, with like this like modern tech age atheism technocracy type thing, there that this is a direct affront to your cultural beliefs. So it's very, very bad. And this is something that, Native Americans are very, very diverse, based on the diverse subsistence strategies, diverse environments across. But you can assume that based on the subsistence strategies that they had, all the other cultures we know of, almost all of them have rituals. They vary greatly, but they have rituals associated with the dead. And disturbing the dead is almost universally seen as something that is very, very bad to do. It's not something I would want done to my own ancestors, and it bothers me that it was done to other people's ancestors, especially when it's a specific group of people, that it's being done to more. And that has to do, of course, with those same types of grave beliefs being imported and hangers on from references to this in our own Western culture, that the people were doing it. right? It's like it is an extension of this animistic belief of stealing the power of somebody. That's what the motivation is implicitly of somebody theoretically going out and stealing the head of Geronimo, one of the greatest war leaders of any Native American on the continent, on Turtle Island, as you might call it.
Yeah.
One might call it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's that's a pretty good way of putting it. It's you can't really you goes back to that respect how where they came from. Like you're familiar with Kennewick Man?
Of course. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. 1990s,
Yeah.
Pacific Northwest, your
Yep.
place. Yep.
Yeah. Right up
Washington.
here, and the tribes up here, the anthropologists and archaeologists up here have gotten pretty fucking good at working with the tribes. They were pretty good with it in the 90s. They knew how to navigate these things. But Kennewick Man offered a unique situation because the age of it made it where a lot of this is where this discussion that earlier we were talking about the difference between coming from a land bridge and just coming from the ground belief, really the rubber meets the road here. The archaeologists, they're looking to see, is this guy Asiatic? Is this guy where's the genetically, where did this guy come from? So we can figure out how the peopling of the Americas happened. To the indigenous Americans, why are you trying to determine if he's our ancestor? He's our ancestor. He's on this land. We came from this land. He's here. You weren't here, right? What's the fucking thing about? Bury the motherfucker and let's move on. And so that's that kind of very much difference in where you almost, there's some things, it's one of those things you almost can't reconcile the difference. It's almost impossible to put the two together and have them on the same table. It's just almost mutually exclusive.
It's emblematic of the arguments that we have. We're not even speaking the same language oftentimes as the archaeologists. We believe a different set of core beliefs. And for me, I'm sympathetic to both sides of the Kennewick Man argument. And I believe what actually ended up eventually happening is like, well, number one, it doesn't mean that they're not the ancestor of the Native Americans living there. I wouldn't say necessarily that it definitely means that they are, although in an emotionally charged situation, I just wouldn't bring that up. Me personally, as not an archaeologist, not my job to argue with that. But like just because it had genetic markers as it's way older, like some of these, my understanding of genetics is much lower than my understanding of cultural anthropology as well as archaeology. But I know enough to know that that there could have been influences and DNA traces that would be very different from today, even if it is the ancestor of the people living there. And I'm willing to say, assume, and not even make a distinction between, a spiritual and a metaphorical relation, even if there isn't a direct, which there ended up being a direct, I think that was proven, of some local people. But even if there wasn't, there is a spiritual and metaphorical connection with that person. But like it did tell us something, which is that this person had markers of like the Uralic Mountains. And this is the Uralic Mountains, and the steppes are like, in a lot of ways, the birthplaces of a lot of civilizations and a lot of peoples. A lot of different people come from there that end up being very important. And they're finding a lot more stuff now in the area surrounding the Uralic Mountains. And I think people initially were like, oh, this guy's like a European. It's like, no, what likely happened, and I might be wrong on this, is that this person had genetic markers of their own past ancestor who did come through Beringia, not 12,500 years ago, but much older, through the heir apparent to Clovis first, the Kelp Highway hypothesis, which includes, by the way, contrary to Flint Dibble's claims of 20 to 30,000 years, it's built on over 40 years of research into Pleistocene seafaring. Pleistocene seafaring is something that is assumed and is supported by archaeological evidence of over 50 years across 3 or 4 different continents. Dozens of sites, it is supported. Never once has a boat, a watercraft ever been found. And the archaeologists, the maritime archaeologists, Flint famously is an archaeologist that studies food. The maritime archaeologists have no problem with asserting the things like the Kelp Highway hypothesis because there is a mountain of evidence for Pleistocene seafaring. So when the Kelp Highway hypothesis comes out more than 10 years ago, there isn't even an argument for it. There is an
Yeah.
assumption of Pleistocene seafaring being a part of it, and it's in that argument. And Flint is comfortable with citing the Kelp Highway hypothesis, even though it's built on evidence that contradicts one of his other arguments. And I think that one was just a mistake, not a lie, because I don't think Flint knows a lot about maritime archaeology.
No.
I think he knows less than I do, and I'm an amateur, right? But these genetic markers in Kennewick Man likely traced to an ancestor who is related to ancestors of these Uralic peoples who end up going into Europe later. And yeah, that's the end of that rant. That's the point of it. Yeah.
No, that was. Dude, don't be self-conscious about the rant, man.
Oh no, I'm good. I'm just
okay. Run with them.
I was just letting you know that it was over.
Okay, cool. Yeah. I was gonna say don't feel bad, man. That's gold. That's good stuff. It's funny how what you said about his lack of expertise there. It's one of the funniest things because he'll say that kind of thing all the time, like. When he says that Atlantis is the same as a flat Earth, he's like, he wants exactly show me an archaeologist that studies the late Pleistocene, blah 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 blah. And it's like, well, why all of a sudden does it have to be specific archaeologists that study specific things? Because you know that archaeologists that don't study specific things really can't weigh in on it well. Yet you come in and weigh in on all of these other things, and it doesn't even fundamentally get Graham's hypothesis accurate, and then doesn't even get the archaeology side of it accurate. I mean, the part with where he's the idea that Graham has this like high technology that has to be achieved when he's consistently for decades has said that he's talking about specifically when it comes to technology, his smoking gun is the maps that have longitude with better than we should be given credit for without a timepiece. So he talks about longitude. And Flint says, what map making? What does that even have to do with anything? That's nothing to do with technology, blah, blah, blah. It's like you don't even understand that you need a timepiece for it. Mm-hmm. And don't even understand that it's like one of Graham's fundamental positions. It goes all the way back to fucking fingerprints of the gods. And then when Graham says something about it, Flint's like, no, that's not what you believe. You believe nobody believes that, Graham. It's like, Jesus fucking Christ, man. You're just tell him what the straw man is and then tilt away, buddy, and you dock yourself out. But
and you can, they'll still argue it, even though I take the clips. I'm like, here it is. He didn't say that. And they're like, no, it doesn't matter. That's not like, come on, man. I just want to talk about the content. And so I'm so happy I'm here to talk about it with you.
Yeah, me too. It's good to have you here. Let's Steve Martin here. Oh, Steve Martin. I've liked your stand-up for a long time, sir. Ojibwa, Dakota, and Winnebago are citizens of St. Paul, Minnesota in modern times, but the mounds here were built by the Hopo culture 2K years ago. Kind of odd that they would be repatriated by the modern natives. Yeah, they usually try to find the tribes that their things are associated with. That's actually a point of contention from time to time where they'll every now and again they'll like a university will tell like one tribe, they're like, hey, we've got these bones that we're going to do this with, and then they'll start doing it, and the other tribe will show up and they'll be like, hey, some of those bones are ours and you actually need to do this other thing with them. And it just kind of, it's funny how it just goes back and forth like that, where it's no worries, Steve, thank you very much, man.
You have to like create the criteria that you judge this stuff by. And, while Native Americans and their beliefs have converged based on their interaction with the technology and of the modern world, just like all other cultures have, regional dialects are going away because of mass media, things like that. And like things are converging, but there's still differences. Like one of my biggest complaints about the way that by they, I mean like the general zeitgeist, not necessarily archaeologists, because they're usually better about this stuff. Sometimes, a lot of times used for their own ideological benefit, but I think in general, they're better than the general public. But again, that's through the value system that I've created. So to be once again, the resident indigenous activist or activist for indigenous people, I would say that one of the worst ways in which modern society treats indigenous people of our country, of the United States, the indigenous people that live here and have lived here, is that they homogenize them into a single monolith and a single way of thinking. And this is, to me, a dehumanizing way of thinking about a people, because there are cultural beliefs that differ between these groups of people. There's cultural beliefs that differ, of course, between the Pequot of Connecticut, the Massachusetts, the Haida and the Tlingit of the Pacific Northwest, the Aleutians on the coast of Alaska,
Yeah.
the Pueblos in the Southwest. They're not around anymore. I think the Tohono O'odham on the border with Mexico versus the Haudenosaunee on the east side of the Great Lakes, and the Ojibwa or Ojibwe. Both of them are fine, I think, on the west side of the Great Lakes. There's versus the Apache. Like, these are vastly different groups of people with vastly different histories who develop out of different geographies. And to just throw out Native Americans and say that Native Americans think this, and not even get in, and that's not even getting into the differences in individuals, because these are people. Okay, it's like sometimes they're treated like they're not people. They are individuals. They have different beliefs, even within the same demographic. There might be two 20-year-olds that live on the Diné, the Navajo reservation, two 20-year-olds, same height, both men, and they think completely different things, even though they're from the same culture. And that should be talked about more.
I agree. I completely agree with that. There's a lot of indigenous Americans that live as part of white man culture up here. Even my brother-in-law is he's native enough that he gets to second deer tag, and he gets the check from the state. He got a big check for water rights when him and my sister first got married 30 years ago. His dad passed away, and they met each other at church. They're big time Bible thumpers, but when his dad passed away, there was still a lot of indigenous ceremonies that went on. It's and he, like you living in the Midwest, I never really saw Native Americans very much, but living up here in Washington State, I rub elbows with them. I bump into them all the time. I drive by the Spokane Tribal Center, like their little tribal right in the middle of town, right? See it every day. And they are, they're just fucking people, man. They're just like anybody else. They're just people. They've got their own culture, and some of them are really into being an Indian, and some of them are really don't give a rat fuck, and they just want to go to work and earn a paycheck and take care of their family. And some of them are really into that stuff a couple of days a week, when the rest of the time they're earning a check. And some of them are sitting on the side of the road next to the white guy, all bummed out on fentanyl. It's just the fucking way it is, man. It's just the fucking way it is, right?
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
I mean, it's I was watching your last chat with I forget his name, the obituary guy though, but he was talking about the noble savage myth. Bugs Mitchell, thank you. He was talking about the noble savage myth, and that's a perfect example of just like, a lot of Native Americans would probably, not probably, a lot of Native Americans would certainly latch onto that. So all I got to do is build a sweat lodge, and these stupid honkies will throw money at me when they come by. Okay, fucking slap those things up, buddy. Honey, make me some more beads. But right, seriously. I mean, but other guys are going to be fucking offended by that. And you know how you can tell the difference? You ask them. Fucking, it's not that complicated.
You have conversations. You can do that, dude. They're here. They're people. It's crazy.
They're still alive.
So weird. Right. I know that, like, people live in various different areas. They have like less interaction. You live in Oklahoma or Washington State, around the Seattle area, you're going to have, there's more Native Americans there, or in South Dakota. Where I live, I'm from like the county that the Pequot, there's two reservations, two different Pequot there. And so like I did grow up around a few, not as much as like Oklahoma or Washington, but quite a few. And like in most places, they're relatively close. And a lot of them do public events where you as any race of person, white, black, Asian, whatever, not native, you don't have to be. A lot of them do public events where you can go. And even if you don't do that, they are in your communities. They're around if you looked a little bit and have a conversation if you want to. I'm not saying you have to, but I'm saying that if you're interested in how, somebody thinks, then talk to them, and don't just talk to one person, right? Talk to multiple people. And that's true of any culture.
That's right.
I would do the same thing with the sweat lodge if people cared about Irish ancestry.
Yeah, exactly.
Set up like I would. I'd throw on a fake accent, Irish flag in the thing, pretend I was in the IRA. I'd do it. I don't care if I was making good money at it. Yeah.
The whole 9 yards. Yeah, buddy. I think we'll wrap this up in about 18 minutes, about 9:30 my time, if that works for you. just
Yeah,
to
that
make
works.
sure I got time to put my kid to bed. He's a teenager, so if I don't go put him to bed, he won't do it on his own. It's like all that stuff. Now, if I make him miss a day of school, that's the day that they taught all the stuff that he needs to know for the entire year, and it's my fault.
Oh, and then it's your fault.
Just that one day, that one class. You made me miss algebra class that one day, and that was the day they taught me the entire book. He's good, but he's a teenager, right? If I've gotta leave that sewed shut. So
Awesome.
But yeah,
All right.
it is crazy. No, I'm not in the Midwest. It's almost 9:30 over here on the West Coast. It's always your fault, LOL. Yes. Yeah, the indigenous, the tribes up here, it's funny. You go to the reservations here, and it's not like the ones in Oklahoma. You know, you go to Oklahoma, and it's kind of just like you're just in part of the town. It just looks. The reservations are very, very Indian here. They look at you. You are out in the sticks. You know it when you get there, and everything's just laid out different. And the people are different. One of them, if you show up there like with any sort of goods whatsoever, even just driving through, like you have to go check in at their front the Florida reservation. They make you check in and stuff like they're not going to have nobody trading beads to their people, because traveling salesmen used to come through on paycheck day. They get 2 checks a month, right? So you fucking show up there and
it's like base with the military.
Yep. Same exact thing, peeling money off of them. And
disgusting.
Thanks, Anubis. I'm really, really glad you enjoyed it. It's been a great chat.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this.
Yeah, I have too. I'm really glad to have you on.
It's a little cathartic to talk about some of this stuff, to be honest.
It is.
Yeah,
I was waiting to have you on. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead. You go ahead.
Oh, I was waiting to have you on until you're working on a comprehensive video about the debate and all that. And I was waiting to have you on until then, but I had a cancellation. So I was like, well, hell, I'll just slide you forward a little bit here.
Yeah. And that's going to take a while. I think I'm going to have a few more videos out and then eventually compile it all, because it's like one of these things that, like, you know, it's, if you talk about the individual pieces of evidence, it's way easier if you just lie about it, you know, certain people doing that. But, you know, these, you know, you brought up earlier this post about like, oh, the pyramids look alike. It's just like whales and sharks. It's like, okay, cute graphic the 12-year-old made. Good job. Good on you for having initiative and making something instead of just flipping through TikToks all day. But at the same time, you bring this into an argument between adults, and it's like, okay, let's talk about the context in which we're talking about that. It's like, maybe on their face you compare 2 pyramids together, then you look at them and you're like, whatever, they look kind of similar. But then you take it with all these other similarities. And ironically, that is how it's done in cultural anthropology. Establishing a cultural link is done through multiple different pieces of material culture and how they change over time. You're not just going to use one. One is noise. It's statistical noise. It doesn't mean anything. You create these connections through multiple pieces of evidence, and then the idea that they are a coincidence starts dropping down on a scale, right? And when there's a bunch of them, it becomes much more severe. So it is a straw man to look and say that Graham even claims that, because Graham, he might mention that one piece of evidence sometimes, but when he's actually crafting the argument that he's crafting, that is not the argument. That is one piece of evidence for the greater argument. And it sucks that it's talked about in that way. But, you know, I was in the comments below that post. I was talking to the person. You know, they seemed well-intentioned, and they said that they had watched the show and everything. I don't think it was that big of a deal, especially coming from a 12-year-old. But, you know, it's a weird situation, because a 12-year-old does it, and then it's a different thing when an adult posts it to the internet, and then I'm responding to them posting it and not the 12-year-old. I don't want to insult a kid, but, like, you know, you're the one who brought this into a separate context. And I wasn't insulting a kid, but I'm sure that someone's going to throw that in my face. Some, you know, discontent is going to do that, and let them do it. Let them call me a sexist, a misogynist. They can call me a racist, whatever ism they want to come up with. It doesn't affect my perception of myself, and it shouldn't for anybody.
Yeah, no, it shouldn't. Where I worry about those things, and in particular, like, it's something that I used to worry about it more for other people, like Graham and stuff, where I was, you know, I'm just some little guy on YouTube, but now I'm starting to get enough traction where it does kind of matter. It's like when I talked to Jimmy Corsetti about it, like he put it, where it's like, if you look up my name, sometimes you'll find people talking white supremacy stuff associated with it. Then people don't want to click on it, and then I go talk to somebody and they look me up, and it's like, okay, well, that actually, now that makes a lot of sense, where it's not just like some dipshit on Twitter trying to say you're a racist. I'm like, yeah, fuck you, retard, get out of here. This is somebody that's actually like, this actually has teeth in the real world. This could actually hurt me.
Right. And if that's when, Flint loves to throw out defamation and slander, but like when you're getting perceived in the public eye, if it's determined, like this is where you might actually get into defamation. I don't think that even what Flint has said, it would qualify as defamation just because of the careful way in which he worded it, which I think is probably very intentional. But like, to be defamation, it has to either be an outright known lie, and it has to be confirmed that it's an outright lie. And any lawyers in the chat can correct me for my understanding, but this is my understanding of being a avid enjoyer of internet drama, which is full of people suing each other.
Oh God, is it ever?
It has to be either, it's two things which functionally are the same, which is a absolute lie, or like it has to be, they have to have known it was a lie. It has to, or it has to be gross disregard, completely negligent for the truth, which is effectively lying. It has to be established that that is a thing. And then the second part of that is you have to establish actual damages that result from that lie. It can't just be, if a 100 sub YouTuber puts out a video that says that someone else ran a crypto scam that they had nothing to do with, that's not defamation. And it's not defamation, not because it's a lie, but because it doesn't fit that other criteria, because it didn't have any measurable effect. You have to demonstrate those two things, which is also why I argued in my response video to Flint, where Flint called me a liar. And Flint, that's not something I take lightly. No. Integrity is very important to me. It's one of my core values. And when you insult my integrity, Flint, when you call me a liar, you have done something that is very, very bad and very wrong. And that's something that I'm going to respond to in kind. And I think that you, Flint, because you're probably watching this, need to take a look at yourself and understand the way that you talk to other people and how that affects not just me, but other people, and how that affects how people treat you. You are responsible for the consequences of your own actions. And the way that you have acted, Flint, has been something that I would be disappointed with my teenage niece and nephew acting. It is disrespectful and arrogant, and it's bad. Okay. But again, wipe slate clean. You can totally wipe it clean whenever you want to, and when you're going to stop calling people things they don't want to be called.
Yeah. I completely agree with that. I've said it 1,000 times. I'll say it even point blank as far as the debate goes. I would have done none of the videos I did on the debate if Flint wouldn't have waffled like he did when the racism thing came up, and that whole racism thing, and Flint just pretends like that was no big deal, instead of if he would have just said, you know what, man, since then I've learned that this was wrong, and I blah blah blah, I should have retracted. I shouldn't have said if that would. I would have fucking turned off the debate and walked away, and fucking I would have went and bought a pack of cigarettes and smoked one. God damn it. Not really, but it was it's like I want good faith skeptics in our community arguing with the dreamers. I think that is the only path forward, but people like that are not good faith skeptics. They're cynics, and they're doing it for ego driven reasons. He's not coming in there trying to say, here's where you guys might have a point, here's where you guys have no point. He's trying to form a false narrative that makes Atlantis the same as a flat earth. And at that point, it's like, dude, you're no different than anybody else in the community that's full of shit. I don't have any use for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It makes your argument as evidence-based as like the people dropping in my comments sometimes now that I've started talking about archaeology. Historically, it still mostly is cultural anthropology. That's my thing. I feel that my hand has been forced here to discuss this stuff because no one else did. When no one talked about the 7,000-year-old shipwreck being a canoe, which I recognized just based while I was live streaming it, like, that's not true. That's not right. What's going on? That's what made me look into this stuff more. it makes his argument as evidence-based when you ignore evidence like that as the people who are arguing like the Tartarian theory, which I'm sure you're aware of,
Oh,
which is
yes.
one of my favorites just for how interesting it is, but has no teeth as far as I can tell, based on the current
No.
evidence I've seen. Someone else
Yeah.
can come out in the future, but I think highly unlikely.
Oh, come on. What's this omnibar? Okay. Islam. What the hell? Laser. I don't even know what's this omnibar shit. I'm about to watch. Is this spam or is this just insanity? Or is this just somebody making a point about something? I'm confused. I'm lost, man. It's a goddamn internet.
Omnibar?
Omnibar.
Oh, yeah,
comes
no,
with free
block
money.
that guy.
Okay. I was
Block that guy.
thinking,
He's
is
a
it?
scammer in your comments.
Okay. That's what I thought.
Wait, is it?
I don't know.
I don't know.
Well, it is
I
now.
don't know.
Sorry. It
Yeah.
sure looked like Omnibar. I've seen stuff about. I mean, I'm not trying
Someone
to be
says $32,000 free money. That's a red flag.
That's a red flag. And also, and he did start saying I don't want people to feel like they can't say things, but there's certain things that are a little spicy, and I have this channel that I don't want taken down. So you can't start saying a bunch of stupid shit without me banning you. And I'm not trying to be a dick about that. You could say fuck, you could say all kinds of stuff. If you start saying the kind of stuff that would get you kicked off a PlayStation Network, you're going to get kicked off of here. Sorry, I'm not trying to be a dick. That's just how it works.
Yeah, it's a pretty far line to cross, but yeah. And we are, by the way, if people don't know, YouTubers are, it doesn't generally happen unless it gets like super crazy, but you are somewhat responsible for your comment section. You are required to moderate it. And
if you don't, my video that proved that the origins of Atlantis hunting weren't based in white supremacy, that video's YouTube shut the comments off on it because I wasn't moderating it heavily enough. Apparently I needed to go there every fucking day, and I wasn't. So you just can't. I didn't do it. I can't turn it back on.
At least that's all they did, right?
Thank God.
Shut them off.
I didn't even get a notification. I just noticed one day, I'm like, well, I used to see these comments all the time, and now I'm not.
Yeah.
And
I do see a comment as well that's talking about how canoes are stored. I assume Man Network wasn't in here earlier. I did mention that about an hour and a half ago, I think, sometime like that. And yes, I actually I cut out a dugout canoe based on an archaeological find from the 16th century in Massachusetts, southern New England, eastern Algonquin Native American find. And I cut this 12-foot log down to a canoe. And I know quite a bit about those. And some of its practical experience, which is something that certain archaeologists do, but not everybody. No. Yeah. So yes, they would have been stored. So it's not a ship. This is a line from one of those videos. He called this ship a shipwreck off the coast, and it was neither a ship. It was not a ship. It was not a wreck. And it was not off the coast. It was three things wrong. It was none of those things.
Oh, that's great. That's funny, but that's not, and it's not surprising. And I would have liked to have seen, like, if he would have came in there with good faith and been like, instead of trying to win the debate and said, okay, so we both agree that there's no metallurgy, right? Okay, yeah, there's no metallurgy. Okay, so we don't need to go into that whole thing. So what about the seed thing? Should we talk about that? Okay, let's discuss the seeds. Here's why I think there was no, and that, like, if he would have kept it as a conversational thing like that, that's the kind of thing that would have made it like, he wouldn't have only gained 10,000 subscribers from the whole ordeal. And he wouldn't have people like me, like you, and like all these other people in the world thinking that he did some fucked up shit, because it would have been a conversation instead of going in looking for a win. But like his video right afterwards, somebody made that stupid meme of him like as a boxer standing over Hancock knocked down, and he posted, okay, that's great. You made the meme. Somebody else made the meme, but like that's how you feel it was a fight. Okay, well, if that's how the fight was on the Joe Rogan Experience, let me tell you about the fight for public relations, that you are losing like a fucking house of fire, sir.
Right.
You are dead in the water on that one. So.
And also, by the way, Flint's first interaction with this, the thread that Flint originally posted, was disrespectful on its face. I know a lot of people probably haven't seen it, but Flint's initial thing, and it went quite viral. I don't remember how many impressions it got, but it included, like, he was very condescending, which is pretty normal for academics, but he was very condescending. He even portrayed there's an image that he put on it of a guy like crying like this, and he was like calling Flint like this crying guy, which is like, those are fighting words to me. That's, don't do that. But the thing that I haven't seen anyone else talk about this, so I'm dropping this at the end of yours.
Mhm.
He attacked in that thread that eventually leads to them having this conversation live on, or not live, but on Joe Rogan. He attacked Flint's use of negative evidence. He attacked it. And then when he goes on Joe Rogan, he makes his main argument based on negative evidence.
Mhm.
And there's a, like that, I'm going to talk about that eventually.
Yeah.
I haven't got there yet. There's just so many things to cover. It's a mountain of evidence. But that on itself shows, especially when this is a planned argument, it's not like he planned to make the argument this way, knowing what his initial thread was.
Exactly.
And that single event of him in when he's initially arguing, he's just going to use whatever argumentation tactic he can. It's not about finding truth. Or this is when it demonstrates to me that he's not about finding truth in this case. He attacked the use of negative evidence then, and then he made it, because he thought it was his best argument, as the entire basis of his argument, the exact same thing that he attacked the first time. Negative evidence. Yep. And there's validity to negative evidence, but that doesn't explain why he attacked it the first time and then used it. It's like there's different rules for different people.
That is very much that's a great way of summing it up right there. There are different rules for different people. It's if he says that we're projecting white supremacy into the world, he's not calling us racists. If we say that his stuff is projecting white supremacy into the world, and we're calling him racist. It's just it's always the double standard with these people anymore. And it's not all, I shouldn't say these people, because they'll be like, oh, all archaeologists. Is a very select, small handful of people that are acting in bad faith in this community.
Many such cases of that. Yeah.
Yes. All right. So one more time before we tie this up, Sam, why don't you go ahead and pimp yourself out again once more here?
Yeah. So down below the 2 links, check out my YouTube. I do about 2 interviews. Those are numbered on, they're all on my homepage on YouTube. They're all marked there. There's like the standalone videos. I only have a few. The podcast episode, those are interviews, and then I do live streams solo. I watch a bunch of stuff, hang out with the chat. I enjoy that, as well as like on those live streams, I do like with the Archaeostronomer, with a linguist, we have conversations. Those are all on there. Mostly cultural anthropology, dips into other related fields, including archaeology. It's mostly cultural anthropology. But yeah, that's what I do, and I'm pretty active on YouTube, and that link is right below, Twitter. And my Twitter. Yeah. Yep.
You're active on Twitter quite a bit too.
I am. And you can check out my highlights tabs. I have a bunch of threads on cultural anthropology and archaeology. Some of it relating to this stuff.
Yeah, quite a bit of it. And and as you guys have heard already, he's not just like some pyramidiot in here. So there's like real science there and stuff too, right?
Oh, yeah.
Since pyramididists don't do real science, right?
Right. I've been encouraged by both Joseph Wilson, who is an archaeologist who has some level of respect, who I speak to. I think he's disrespectful sometimes, but he's less so. As well as Jimmy Corsetti to talk about my background. And one of those things is in maritime archaeology, doing the canoe. I think that's pretty cool in itself. But academically, I love academics. I love mainstream academia, just like I love thinking about stuff otherwise. 3 bachelor's degrees, history, anthropology, education, done in 4 years, taken 18, 19 credits a semester, summer, winter classes, because I love it. All on the GI Bill. So, that's...
Hell yeah.
That's why I was able to.
Ooh, yeah.
But yeah.
All right. Well, I want to thank everybody so much. Thanks for making it, Sam. I really appreciate it. And
thank you for having me.
All right. We'll see you guys next time. And